Back, please. Come back, come back. So I hope that you enjoyed lunch. It was good food, or as they say in the cheese world, it was Gouda. Crack myself up. So we're going to do a little live demo. We talked about Nico, and you saw how enthusiastic Nico was while her master was talking, snoozing, rolling over. But now we're going to get to see Nico in action. So I will turn the stage over, and we'll get to see Nico do his thing.
All right, so come here, buddy, out. I'm actually not going to put him to work immediately, but I want to talk to you about a couple things a little bit. Put it down. Put it down, wait. So just a couple things so you can kind of understand, and I'm gonna show a video here in a second, but Nico is 3 years old. He is half lab, half golden. He was born in Michigan, where he was puppy raised to be a seeing eye dog with Paws with a Cause. So if you ever saw that show on Apple TV where they talk about the dogs going into the seeing eye world, he has many of the traits that a seeing eye dog would have because he made it very far into the training until he realized that he likes to jump up and hug women a lot. And that doesn't work well for people who have visual impairments. And so he was then purchased by a company in Greenfield, Indiana at the time called Jordan Detection Canine, which has now become the worldwide leader in electronic storage detection canines. ESD stands for electronic storage detection, meaning that we can train dogs to find cell phones, hard drives, computers, flash drives, micro SD cards, hidden cameras, air tags, any device that stores data. What happens with devices that store data is simple. They get hot. When you upload or download, the processing causes them to get warm. When they get warm, the technology will melt. So companies have to spray a chemical on it called TPPO. TPPO keeps the circuit board from melting. It can't be defeated, it can't be masked by other odor, and it cannot be removed from the storage device. Therefore, if you can teach a dog to smell TPPO, you can find anything that is hidden. And so ESD canines are now being deployed across the world on the sole purpose of finding electronic storage devices that contain evidence of child exploitation. Nico is one of those dogs. He is 100% food reward, meaning he eats from a pouch every day. He, in particular, gets 3 cups of food, all fed by my hand. Every time that he finds one device, he gets 1 handful. So he doesn't get cookies, he doesn't get treats, he doesn't get dog bones, he doesn't get snacks. He can only have food from the pouch. When the pouch is empty, he's done for the day. Not to say that if they called when his food was out at the end of the day and they needed him, that I wouldn't give him a little bit, but he'd get very little, and he would have to work that way. Some people think it's mean, but he has only known a life of service, and he loves doing this work, and you'll see when I put him to work how happy he is about working, but he works for food. He can work inside of houses, he can work inside of cars, he can work in water, he can work in fields, he has found stuff in the ground, he has found stuff in ice. He is very well trained to do all of that work for us, and we work on those developmental strategies every single day. His time in deployment in New Hampshire has been over the last 30 months, and over the last 30 months, we have deployed him almost 200 times into the homes of internet predators. He has rescued 8 live victims being manufactured. He has found 2 hidden cameras, one which was being used to produce videos of a 12-year-old girl being sexually assaulted. His biggest find was a laptop computer containing 25,000 videos and images of child sex abuse material. His smallest find was the hidden camera along with micro SD cards, one of which was in a Yeti thermos inside of a closet inside of a classroom. Additionally, he has also been involved in New Hampshire's largest investigation into child exploitation in a ring in which he systematically raided every single home of those predators to find key evidence to hold them accountable. Nico is considered to be one of the top canines in the country, if not in the world right now, for his work and ability to do what he does, and he is the busiest ESD canine in the country. We have deployed in New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, and Indiana, as well as trained in Atlanta and several other states to show off what ESD canines can do. So what I'd like to do before I run them is I'd like to show you just a quick 6-minute video about sort of the legacy and history and how it all started, and a guy who I particularly consider not only a mentor but now a close friend, the guy who developed all of this so that we can have an amazing dog like Nico. So these guys are going to show that for you right now. Come here. Mr. Todd, huh?
I only have this one up here and this one. This is I'm just gonna show him the airflow on that one. This one, and then the one down here where the dog comes down here. So so the odor is right there. Yeah, we're setting the rooms up for the dogs to come in.
Here, one there, and it works. So it's not always just right there.
The next 2 days, everything's in play.
Spike's gonna draw your room. I'm gonna give you 2 tests.
I had a couple of friends that were on Internet Crimes Task Force. One of the guys was talking about the frustration of going into a search warrant. We're going to set up some of the smaller devices, things like a micro SD. They can find this, they can find anything. They spent 8 hours trying to find this one micro SD that had the images on it. The dogs will start indicating, and they get into odor about right here, and they'll start moving their head up. When they leave a house, the biggest question is, man, did we get it all? This is going to be nice because there's some gum in here. I've been a firefighter for 30 years, and knowing working with accelerant canines save us hours in arson fires when a place is completely burned down. I said, I've heard they can train these dogs to sniff out electronic storage devices. He said, well, do you think you could train one? I got the dog, started working with it. Within 2 weeks or so, I ran into my buddies. I said, hey, I want to show you something. And so we put backpacks out. The dog would indicate on a backpack, and I threw a thumb drive out, and he goes, you actually did this. And he said, we have a warrant next week. He said, I want you to come to this search warrant. We went to a search warrant, and the dog found something. They started inviting me to more search warrants, and each warrant the dog would find something. So after like the 8th one is that's when the Jared Fogle case happened.
And now to a story that Eyewitness News broke this morning.
Breaking news, this on Jared Fogle.
Federal agents raided the Zionsville home of Subway restaurant spokesman
Agents
Jared
carried
Fogle.
out electronics to their mobile forensic units parked in Jared's driveway.
Nobody really had heard about these dogs until the day we walked out of Jared's house.
Investigators brought in a black Labrador retriever, only one of 3 such canines in the nation, capable of sniffing and searching out electronic components.
I wasn't allowed to search. All I was supposed to do was work the dog. I didn't know if he indicated on anything, but when they came back a month later on the news and said the dog had found something.
The U.S. Attorney's Office called Bear's discovery of a hidden thumb drive vital to the investigation.
Whatever the dog found was a success of why they busted him.
Today, Jared Fogle has been charged and has admitted to participating in a 5-year criminal scheme to exploit children.
Right now, we've got the handlers here. They've been here for 2 weeks. They're getting used to their dogs. I get the dogs, I train the dogs. When the dogs are completely ready, I call for the handlers. We're just gonna load up rooms, and we're just gonna start working on advanced stuff. We're just gonna see how far the dogs can go. Matt will be at a room, I'll be at a room, and Chaz will be at a room. Ready, Kevin?
Yes, sir. Hey, Bobby, you ready?
Coming from different types of odors like arson investigation, we use the accelerant canines. That odor is so strong. With this odor is so minimal. The dogs really have to get in close to the odor. So we really had to change all of our techniques on how to train dogs. Working 6 or 7 dogs in one room, we're figuring out, what the dog's capabilities are and how close they have to get into odor.
There's going to be tough days and there's going to be good days. These are dogs and they're unpredictable sometimes, but they become predictable if you train and work with them every day, and that's what we try to do.
That's right. Good hit. Solid hit. Solid hit. That was the best any dog has gotten
I
up to
think
so
we're the
far.
cutting edge at this point, only because of just the amount of dogs that are going out. We have 51 dogs out in the last 5 years. And when you have this many dogs working, you can do a lot of research. This is the bonding that we're looking for, and the trust that he has in you. 2017, Operation Underground Railroad donated their first dog. I think by the end of 2021, if things go well, they'll have 40 dogs out, which is huge. There's only 62 internet crimes against children task forces around the nation, and so they're hitting the goal of getting the dogs in every task force.
During this class, we have many OUR dogs that are being trained and certified. Iris is one of them. She put her nose, indicating right where that device was.
Yeah, sure. That's the biggest thing that I like with OUR giving the dogs out, is because they give all the tools that are needed to conduct this type of investigation. I've already had 2 people text me this morning because they're at search warrants right now and they're finding things, and they're just letting me know that what their dogs are doing out there.
I think one of the greatest things about what we're doing here with these dogs from Jordan Detection is that they take out the human element. They change our perspective. They give us the ability to look beyond the normal. That's pivotal, because when we deploy a dog into a home, now we're able to search areas that our eyes can't see, and things that we normally would look at differently now can be searched quickly by a dog. They increase our rate of search, and they also increase our ability to find things, and they do that through the odor. And that is something that you just can't replace.
When the handlers and the dogs are working together, there's nothing better out there solving crimes and helping protect children by using these dogs. It's pretty fantastic.
When I was training dogs, I was running out of places to train. They need a big place to go, and I drove by this place every day and just didn't realize what it was.
When we first started in 2016, I stepped aside from a church that I had planted for 33 years, been the pastor there, to create the Hope Center. Through that process, we ended up with this 26-acre campus, a beautiful facility.
I came over and met with the Hope Center staff and asked if it would be a good place to work the canines.
One of the things that we do here is we live to be a blessing, and we said, absolutely, we would love for you to come and bring your dogs and be able to begin to train them here on campus.
Well, good morning and thank you for coming. This started with one dog, and for this to be this big is pretty amazing. 51 dogs have been out in 5 years. That's pretty huge. I know the commitment the OUR has made to do 20 more. I do appreciate all your work and helping support the law enforcement.
I'll tell you, that movie gets me every time. I absolutely love Todd Jordan to death. I was just with him this past week working on some new stuff, and he's about to deploy his he's going to deploy his 94th dog here in 2 weeks or a week and a half. I'll be back out there at the training barn, and he will then systematically put 94 dogs out across the world to protect children. And Todd's interesting because he doesn't have a history in law enforcement, but he's now a part of law enforcement in that capacity and what he has done to save children. And as I've told him many times, I don't think he realizes how many lives he has saved by the work that he does. He's certainly fond of my buddy here who's trying to pre-search for me and is already starting to talk to me a little bit. But so what you'll see with Nico is when he starts searching, he'll not care about what's going on. He is going to blow out his nose when he smells something like he just did at me. He is going to put his nose on it. He will stay on the item until I tell him cough it. It's pretty neat, and we'll give you a little show. There are a bunch of things here on the stage that you can see. Some have electronic storage devices, some don't. You'll be surprised what it actually does, and he's going to tell me what it does. He can work off of hand signals. He can work off of verbal, nonverbal cues. He's actually been very well trained and can do a lot of things. We certainly have spent a lot of time at the training barn. He and I actually go out there every 3 months to work and do more. Here, out. Good. So I'm just going to start him over here. Put it down. Put down weight. Put down weight. Let's go to work. Work here. Seek here. Seek. 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 Show me. Out. 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 Show me. Show me. Show me. Show me here. Yes. So when you're working canines, right, and you're looking for finite material, sometimes it's hard. And that odor's been sitting in the chair. But in this case, is a SIM card this big, sitting in that chair, right? So we've asked the dog to find something in a pile full of things, and he's telling you in that pile is this, and if you search hard enough, you will have this SIM card, which can contain all kinds of data necessary for us to hold child predators accountable. Good boy, yes you are. Here we go, out, out. Let's work over here. Come on, ready? Let's go. Seek here, seek, seek, yes, seek, seek. Keep working. Seek, 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 seek. You see he stays there for me, seek. I can turn my back to him, he's not leaving, seek. Show me. Show me. I cannot say it to him and he'll still show it to me. Come on, back here. Seek. Show me, come on, show me. Touch it, touch it. You can do it, touch it, show me. Oh, you're so hungry, come here. Come here. You're supposed to show off. Show me. All the way down, show me. Yes, good boy. Has a flash drive? Yes. Good boy. He gets all his food this way every day. We have to train every single day to make sure that he finds it all and that he does it clean. So even when I'm doing a demonstration, if I don't like the way it looks or the way it feels, I force him to do it better. Here, work here, seek here, seek, seek. You can see he's working around food. This is full of food. He'll search that, but he's not going to eat it. Seek here, seek, 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 seek. Sometimes I work him in front of dog dishes full of food. He doesn't touch the food in the dish. Seek, seek, seek here, seek, here, here. Hey, seek up here. Seek up here. Seek up here. Up. Seek up. Seek up. Here. Up. Good. Up, 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 up. You can get in there. Good. Yes. Up, up. Up, up, up. Good. Yes. Here. Here. Work here. Seek here. Seek. 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 Show me. Show me. Yes. Good boy. Stay down. Yes. So it doesn't matter the size of the device, it's going to contain TPPO and he can find it. It doesn't matter if it was set on fire, it doesn't matter if it's buried in the water or ice. Here, work here, work here. Put it down, put it down. Wait, wait. Go to work. He sourced that odor when he first got on stage. You saw him go over and sit down in front of the bucket. He was blowing his nose at me because he was mad. It was super strong and it was basically like dangling a donut in front of a cop's face, like it's right here. Show me. Show me. This is a sealed tote. Show me. Yes. I'll show you what's in it. It's a cell phone. Good boy. Doesn't matter if the containers are sealed. They all bleed off odor eventually, and if it sits there long enough, we'll find it. Here we go. Work here. Here. Put it down. Put down. Work. Seek, 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 seek. Oh, you like that one better? Show me. Show me. Yes. Good boy. Put it down. Hair tie, right? No. Looks like a hair tie. Has a flash drive inside. ESD canines don't care what the item looks like. That's what their benefit is in the field. If it can be hidden in something, they can find it. And that's what we train them to do day in and day out. Here, buddy, I'll let you have one more. Come here. Here you go. Put it down. Put it down, wait. You can pick the one you like the most. Okay. Go to work. I like this one better, Dad. It's bigger. And he'll stay with it. He's showing it to me because he wants me to know he has it. There you go. Now you're doing your hand signals. Yes. Good boy. And that's how they do it. These dogs do this. Put it down. People sometimes think that it's cruel. You know, these dogs are doing this. It's not. He loves to work. What he's doing is brings him great joy. He's energetic. As I was sharing a story earlier, he really does increase our ability to search spaces at a faster rate, so we're able to clear houses. And you know, Todd Jordan probably says it best. The thing that will always haunt investigators in these warrant services are, did we get it all? Did we actually find all the evidence that we need, not only to convict and hold a predator accountable, but more importantly, so that that image of that child is no longer available for somebody to have? Can we take that trophy away from somebody who thinks they're winning? And that's what these guys do. And honestly, I will share with you one last thing here about these dogs. They are also trained in comfort and therapy at the time in which they are purchased because they've already been through a Seeing Eye program. And they have many other functionalities while we're on the warrant. Many of the homes that we go into contain collateral damage because there's somebody in that house doing evil things that everybody doesn't know about. And when we raid that home with investigators, they need help, lots and lots of help. And these dogs can search a home and then provide comfort. They are fantastic to our investigators who not only interview people, but are also in a forensic laboratory looking at hundreds of thousands of images a day or a week, and to help them bridge the gap between life and the tragedies that they see in life is pretty amazing. And I would argue that over the last 30 years, specifically the last almost 17 years that I've been with the ICAC task force. It's been the most grueling work I've ever done in my life. And at the time that I got Nico 30 months ago was probably, you're gonna fall off the stage, pal. Yes, I'll give you some more, because I'm just a ham and I love you. I've often said that, you know, after doing close to 200 child predator interviews, there's a part of your life that you've traded in service, and I would argue that Nico has probably saved my life in some capacity too. So this is Nico, and this is what he does. He's pretty amazing. He definitely is one of the best in the country. I was also sharing with some people that he certified the last time around, which is in his certification process, it's 4 rooms. The 4 rooms are different things in them. Some are hoarder rooms, some are bedrooms and offices. They're all about the same size. 3 of the rooms will have a device. It could be as small as a SIM card. It could be as big as a laptop, hidden somewhere, but they're all hidden. And 1 room is blank. And we're pretty proud of Nico right now. Nobody has beat him. He was able to clear 4 rooms with no mistakes, finding all the devices in 1 minute and 32 seconds, which tells you the value of ESD Canine Nico. He's arguably the fastest ESD Canine in the world right now, living right in New Hampshire with me. He vacations in Kennebunkport where he has a camp, just in case you wanted to know. Last one. Show me. Yes, good boy. So thank you for your time today. I'm going to stick around anyways, and if you want to visit with him, you can certainly visit with him. We're going to let him come down and hang out with the crowd. If you're afraid of dogs, then I don't trust you, but that's okay. Just saying. Or you have something we shouldn't be finding, but that's okay too. We'll talk about it. But yes, so that's Nico. Take a seat. Take a seat. Put it down. Yeah, absolutely. Sure.
That I've met today, and there was some cases where they got kicked off of planes.
Yes.
Because, you know, there was issues with the therapy dog. And
I was kicked off a plane too.
with that.
I was kicked off a plane too with him.
So I wanted to ask, with him being so able to find all the electronics and all the electronics going through security on a plane, they're everywhere in every bin, right?
Yeah, so so here's the thing, like, there's kind of 2 parts to that. One, you should understand that the odor is always present for him. Everywhere he goes, he can smell it. It's like an addiction for a person. It's always right there in the back of your mind that you'd like to drop back in that addiction, but he doesn't act on it until he's put into work mode. And so he might work a room a little bit, he might pre-mark some things and start looking around, and I can see his behavior changing because he's interested, but at the end of the day, he's not gonna do anything until I actually ask him to do it. That said, he's always a little bit hungry. Don't judge me. But he is his best when he is starving. So we have to keep the dogs a little bit hungry and have to manage their food, which is why there's no cookies, treats, or snacks. He has to understand that he has to be a little hungry to do his best. He has, like I said, he's found stuff buried in the ground before for us. So the more that they sit and wait, and sometimes we don't starve them, but we make them wait long periods of times, it's so that they'll be 100% accurate for us when we need them to be. But that's a great question. It's always ever present with ESD canines. Every room has electronic storage devices. So the other thing we can do to eliminate that is I can hook him on a lead and I can just force him to search a particular area at a particular time, as opposed to giving him an entire space I can target. With him, he's very experienced and he's done nearly 200 warrant deployments with me, and so for that reason, he will stay in target with me. He will also just walk. So here, I could just show you this real fast to go down. Like if I want him to search an area, here, come, here. Put it down. Wait. With me. And he'll stay with me and work work in spaces if I want, and I can work him into spaces, and he's going to search anyways until he gets to something he likes. Yes, so I don't even have to have him on a lead, and it just takes practice, time, deployment strategies. He goes to the backpack because that backpack has had that laptop in it all morning, so those 2 things almost smell exactly the same at this point. And we work with the dogs, but did you see him readjust and then put his nose on the device? This smells better than that, but they both smell similar, and both will pay food. So, so we'll be here for a bit. I don't want to take from anybody else, but you can visit with him all you want, and I'll probably end up feeding him a little bit more later before we leave. Oh, that's great. I see. You did a good job. To be polite, I won't say what airline, but the airline said we will not take law enforcement canines no matter what. So I'll leave it at that, and he and I had to find another way to get to Atlanta in a hurry. I am his only handler. He lives with me in my house. He does not live in a kennel. He lives along with my family and can interact with other dogs and play and live a normal life. And when his job is done, which could be anywhere from 7 to 10 years worth of service, he's in his 3rd year, I get to keep him for $1, which I think he's worth the $1 for sure. I do, for his safety. He is a target. He is obviously, but we have great concern for ESD canines that child predators are aware of their deployment strategies and use now. And so for his protection, I try to slim all that stuff off of him and not share that information. However, because he has such a legitimate following, people know who he is, so we have to protect him at all costs. And like I say, I will probably have to do awful things if somebody harms my dog. So he's not brought into terrible environments, unsafe environments. He can search people if I direct him to. I will tell you that I get the first right of refusal to allow my dog to be used at all. Mike will tell you we've done dozens of Homeland Security investigation warrant services, and that everybody who goes out will go in and make sure it's safe for him. And if they don't feel it's safe, they'll tell me that. Or if I go in and I say, look, I know you think it is, but I don't like that, it's never questioned. I mean, at the end of the day, he is a very valuable tool. He is owned by the state of New Hampshire. He was purchased by New Hampshire and is owned by the Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force and then assigned to me over at the Sheriff's Office. So he'll stay with me for the life of his service, and then we'll just do something else together, huh, buddy? Huh, that's a good boy. Thanks very much. So have a good time. Thank you, you're welcome.
What do you guys think of Nico? You're okay too. You're okay too.
We made such a mess up here, sorry.
I could use that scrunchie.
Sure.
Well, thank you so much. That was amazing. Next, we're going to bring up Agent David. David Fife is going to come up and talk to us. We've heard some New Hampshire folks, and so this is our local Portland, Maine agent. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you. And it's really hard to follow Nico.
Right?
I don't think I can. I will not be anywhere near as interesting as that.
Good,
yeah,
good.
Give treats? I'll take treats. Yeah. No, but thank you. And we've, sextortion has been discussed a lot, obviously, today. Mike and Matt, and after me, Ryan is going to give a presentation as well. But I wanted to provide the perspective of the international side of this. I am stationed here in Portland, Maine. I've been an agent here since 2010. But for the last 5 years, I was overseas at one of our embassies in Paris. And while I was there, I got to see the other side of this because, as was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of these leads that come to our agency, Homeland Security Investigations, from overseas, where the offender is overseas or sometimes the victim is overseas and the offender is in the United States. And so we have to work, as our agency does, on both sides of the international angle. And I think a big question that parents might have, I know it's a question that we've gotten here in Maine with some of the cases that we've worked, is, okay, so you've identified the offender he's in Egypt, or he's in Ivory Coast, or he's in Pakistan. Well, now what? Is there going to be justice? Is there going to be an apprehension of that offender? And the answer is complicated, and it depends on the country. It depends on our relationship with the authorities in that country. But that's why our agency has an international footprint that we do. We're in, I think at this point, about 80 countries around the world, 80 embassies. The FBI is in more than that as well, all of the same ones that we're in, but we work together in the overseas environment. But our reason for being there, for all investigative categories, but most particularly for this one, is to develop relationships with international police. And with, while I was in France, my whole role was developing relationships with the French National Police and their other police forces, so that when we get information about an offender who's sextorting an American citizen, we can convince them that this is important, that they need to go out and actually get this person or do everything they can to identify this person, because usually it's not just a victim in Maine, there's a victim all over the place. And no country wants their country to be known worldwide as a center for sextortion or various other types of criminality. But this is what we try to help convince them to care about these types of crimes. It was mentioned earlier, a lot of the sextortion we see here comes from actual legitimate predators, somebody who wants images or videos of a child for sexual reasons. However, overseas, what we're seeing, I think, a little more and more is the financial end of it, where just like I think it was Mike or Matt mentioned that it's similar to the Nigerian scam. It's where you've got a network of criminal actors who are directed, like any business, to go out there and find targets. And when you get those targets, if you can get money out of them, great. By telling them they need to pay you, or you'll release the videos or images. If not that, then you collect the videos and images and you sell them to actual offenders who want this content, either over darknet marketplaces or in some of these closed communities that we see online. So there's an increasing financial aspect to this, I think, coming from the overseas side. But that being said, there's plenty of legitimate sexual predators out there who they don't know what country the child they're victimizing is in. They don't really care, but they also know if they're in a specific country, they know what the capabilities of law enforcement in that country are, and they know they can get away with this. They know that the police there, if they get a lead from us, they're not going to necessarily do very much with it. And so when we're overseas, we try to change that. We try to change that perspective and make them care about these types of offenses and train them as to what to do, how to approach, how to identify additional victims if they get the offender's electronic devices. So that's sort of the role that our agency has overseas. I guess, obviously, as others have mentioned, the pandemic has made this very much worse. We see that in a lot of ways, both on the victim side, but also the consumer side, because our agency focuses on consumers of international child exploitation material. Namely, you may have heard about in Southeast Asia, there's entire organizations that sell essentially live streaming child sex videos. So they have access to children, and they will stream it over a variety of networks, Skype, on Telegram channels, anything, and they'll get money for this. And we've seen through the pandemic, when more people are at home, more people in front of a computer, the consumption of this is increasing. So we've seen a lot more leads at our overseas offices for offenders who have been caught here in the United States exploiting children in various other countries through these types of trafficking rings. But that's, I kind of just wanted to touch on the international side of this, and more importantly, let people know that we are overseas. We are working as best we can with these foreign law enforcement authorities to get action on these leads, because there's so many of them. There's too many of them, and we have to keep it at the forefront of our counterparts' minds so that they understand that these are serious crimes. These are serious offenses with victims all over the world. So that's. So
when would somebody call you? So here in Maine, when would somebody call your agency, for example?
So a lot of the time we will get either calls from local police. So we have there's a lot of situations where a local PD here in the my office covers the southern, I think 5 or 6 counties of Maine. So a local police department in that area will call and say, hey, a parent called, they found that their child reported that they were being sextorted. What can we do? And so we'll respond. We will, get consent to look at the devices. Sometimes, we can engage the target and see what additional information we can get in a continuance of the conversation. Other times it's a forensic issue. We start subpoenaing internet service providers. And that's the other benefit. In an overseas environment, our agency has access to the American internet service providers. So we can send subpoenas, we can get information for our foreign counterparts much more quickly than they can. For them to get information from an American company, it requires what's called a MLAT, which is a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, and those take a long time. They take years sometimes to get simple data. And so if we can fast track that for them, they see a good utility in coming to us and working these cases with us.
We'll be talking question and answers at the end during our panel. But what, if you had the microphone, and you kind of do, what would you want our community to know? One, about they see something on their laptop or on their kid's phone, just from your perspective, they call the local police, they report the local police, police engage you. What is the takeaway that you really want to leave here today?
Well, I guess a major takeaway is that we will try everything that we can to, no matter whether the offender's in the United States or in any other country, we'll do everything we can to get actual justice for that victim.
And you guys are kind of like a web, right? So not only is Homeland Security and local police, like what Matt Fleming and Mike was talking about earlier, but you guys are working together just nationally and internationally. So it's sort of like one giant web over the United States that also goes over across our globe as well.
Right.
So when offenders, and we're finding out that offenders or collectors have a lot of data, right? Not just one picture of one child, but they collect all these things, that you guys are able to locate it no matter where it's at, call nationally, call locally, call nationally, call internationally, and be able to use your resources, dogs if needed,
right.
Being able to subpoena to get into the computers and find out what's going on. So that's sort of a wonderful web that we have.
Right, and overseas in an embassy, we're working very closely with our other American law enforcement partners there, because, the other agencies might have resources that we don't have in that country that will help our case and our victim, get the justice that they need. So
and you mentioned justice before, and I don't know this, but I remember hearing that when a human being has been sexually exploited and they have found the collector's items, images of that person, and now that person is an adult, there is a victims fund where when the offender has been arrested, that they have to pay money into a fund so that the victims get compensation, right? So is that still a thing?
Yeah, that is it's a restitution. So a lot of times when an offender is convicted, at least certainly federal level, the court will order a restitution to the victims. And that's why identifying the victims and the full spectrum of victimization is very important, because then you can ensure that those victims have a right to restitution. And so in some cases with some of the most broadly disseminated child exploitation series that, any investigator who's worked these cases for a while, there's certain series of, unfortunately, child exploitation material that are some of the most, commonly seen on a warrant. But every time those are seen, that's an opportunity for the victim has been re-victimized by that offender, even though that offender wasn't the one who produced it. Yeah. And so they have access to that restitution that particular offender might be ordered to pay.
That was one of the reasons why we wanted to have this conference, because we know that parents don't feel equipped to be able to, they find out that their child's naked picture or video or whatever has gone out, it's leaked, it's gone out. And they don't know who to call, what to do. It's embarrassing, there's shame, they want to keep it, secret. But really being able to call that out, get in touch with your school or get in touch with your local law enforcement to be able to say something, because if your child is being sextorted, then odds are many other children are being sexually exploited as well.
Right. Yeah, it's rare that it's just a single one-off.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving us an international perspective on this. And now we're going to bring Detective Ryan Closeup, who's going to talk about our local presence here. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Yeah, appreciate it. Ryan? Thank you.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's very strange having a microphone, because when you're as big as I am, your voice can really project. And so now I'm going to try as hard as I can not to yell at anyone. All the time in my roles as a law enforcement officer, I often hear that people think I'm yelling at them, and I'm like, no, I'm just big and I have a loud voice. So first, I'd like to just thank Catherine for inviting me to be here. What a difficult conversation to have, but what an important one. I don't know that there's much more important that we can talk about, but safety for our youth. I want to preface my remarks with, I am going to give you an actual case that I worked on that will have ages, no names, but it will be difficult to hear. I think anytime we talk about the trauma of things such as this happening to the youth in our community, I think it's difficult to hear. But again, like I said before, it's important for us to talk about. So my name is Ryan Close. Currently, I'm a sergeant with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office, not too far from here, just a little further up. I think once you hit J, you're in Franklin County. I started my law enforcement career 15 years ago working for the Westbrook Police Department, and I'll just give you a very brief synopsis of how I ended up where I am now and where I did this work. I started out like most police officers. After I graduated the academy, I started working patrol at night, in the middle of the night, responding to domestics, bar fights, the kind of quality of living calls for service that most police departments in urban areas respond to. I had an opportunity very early on in my career to go to work for the Criminal Investigations Division as a school resource officer in our high school. Probably the coolest job I ever had because I got to coach varsity sports. And I'd always had, when I was in college, I had worked with at-risk youth and done some mentoring, so I'd always had kind of a soft spot for at-risk youth, and we had no shortage of at-risk youth in the community of Westbrook. So getting to be a school resource officer as well as a coach, you really got to see kids and get to interact with them in a non-enforcement capacity. A lot of times when police get called to a scene, to a home, we're there as police officers. We've been called there and we have to engage in our jobs, which is often serving, protecting, and likely enforcement capacity. Shortly, a couple years later, I got another incredible opportunity to go to work for a federal task force that did fugitive investigations. The task force was sponsored by the United States Marshal Service. I got deputized as a U.S. Marshal, and I worked for 3 years full-time for this task force, arresting predominantly people wanted for violent crimes, and they were believed to be armed at the time that we were apprehending them. So a lot of people who had committed homicides, a lot of people that did not want to go to jail or prison. Very dangerous job, but very important, and I really enjoyed that as well. While I was doing that, I started to get trained in some of the areas that we're discussing here today with tracking cell phones, using social media as an investigative tool to find somebody who didn't want to be found. I got promoted out of that back into the Criminal Investigations Division and started getting my certificates in computer and cell phone forensics. At that point, I became an examiner, and I started using a bunch of different softwares to do internet crime against children investigations, child exploitation investigations, but all on a local level. In fact, Agent Fife here, I've known for well over a decade in that capacity as I was one of those local police officers that would have to call him and say, hey, this is bigger than I can handle here. And we could really use the resources that you guys have. And what Catherine was talking about earlier about how we have kind of a network with the HSI and the FBI as well as the Secret Service, we really do network together to try to provide that service to our communities. I finished my time in Westbrook. I have young children, which I'll talk about at the end, and decided that I didn't want to wait until I retired to buy our dream home. So we bought our home in Franklin County, and I moved up there as an opportunity to raise my family the way that we wanted to. So that's the quick story about me. What I'm going to tell you today is not an international story, and it's not a case that left the state of Maine. This is a case that happened right here in our own backyard, and it is one of dozens that I could tell you, but I think what's important about this case, aside from the ages of the people involved and the conduct of what had happened, I think it's important to see how quickly and how efficient the suspect and predator in this case was able to affect so many people in such a short amount of time. The police patrol responded to an interaction that had been called in on 911 between a male who was almost 50 years old and a young boy, approximately 10, 11, 12 years old, in the middle of a street where a firearm actually ended up being displayed in this interaction. Very bizarre, as you would imagine. Not a lot of people are pulling guns on 10-year-old kids. So the police go, and they start talking, and there starts to be some, through their interviews, starts to be some accusations or some non-specific types of statements being made that this guy was, this older man who was almost 50, was somehow giving or selling alcohol or tobacco or marijuana to some very young teenage kids. They called the Criminal Investigations Division, and we ended up interviewing a couple of the kids that were nearby. They weren't far. What we ended up learning over the next several months is that through the use of Facebook and Snapchat, a gentleman who was almost 50 years old had made contact with a couple of young girls in the neighborhood between the ages of, I think at that time they would have been 13 to 15 years old. Through conversing in an online platform, the juveniles were able to acquire first tobacco, Juuls, vapes, cigarettes, that kind of stuff from this gentleman. And then that began to escalate to alcohol. And then it began to escalate to marijuana. I want to try to stay in the lane of the actual investigation and not get too far into the psychology of why they were asking for these things or how this was happening, just that it was happening. These kids, 13, 14, and 15-year-old kids, there were about 4 or 5 of them at the time, were being groomed. And they didn't know they were being groomed because they thought they were getting what they wanted out of this interactions that they were having with this adult male. So as time went on, and literally short of a 30-day span of time, they began to send pictures, images, videos in various states of nudity and undress, and then began engaging by themselves and then with each other in various sexual acts, and then distributing them to the male in exchange for alcohol, tobacco, and marijuana. Those meetings that were taking place online, those interactions, that dialogue that was taking place, began to happen in person. It was no longer just online. And a couple of the young girls began to recruit other young girls, in fact, younger girls. One of the girls was 11 years old. I believe she was in 5th grade. And had recruited this young woman to come over to this gentleman's house, which was in a subdivision. It looked like every other house in the neighborhood. You would drive by and have no idea what was going on. I'll also tell you that this gentleman had a job. He was married. And by all accounts, if you drove by, you'd have no idea what was happening in that house. As the investigation continued and we were able to put a timeline together of when these activities started and how they progressed and who was affected, we ended up identifying more than a dozen girls in less than a 60-day period of time who this male was able to victimize in various states, from crimes of solicitation over the internet or over text message to actual physical molestation and sexual crimes that were occurring in his vehicle around town, as well as in his home, in his residence. There were a lot of things that became very problematic in this investigation. One of the most difficult things was that as we had identified him and had put him in jail so that we could make our community safer, we had a lot of problems with the kids. We had their social media. We had the content of their dialogue. We knew what had happened, but we couldn't get the kids to disclose it to us, which made a huge problem in court as we were preparing to indict this individual. And one of the things that really became prevalent, and you've seen a couple of slides up here, again with the blaming and shaming of victims, they felt culpable. A couple of these kids felt culpable, felt responsible for what had happened. So they didn't want to tell us. They didn't want to tell the police. They didn't want to tell their counselors, their trusted adults in their community, and they really did not want to tell their parents. I had a couple of kids that I was interviewing and I was talking to who were begging me in tears not to tell their parents what they had done or what had happened to them. Very difficult case. That case matriculated its way through the criminal justice system for probably the better part of a year. And unfortunately, I don't remember off the top of my head, but I know it was decades that the male was sentenced to prison for. Because of the courage of those young girls to talk about what had actually happened, and obviously the hours and weeks of work that went into that. So I made a couple of notes because I think that the opportunity to learn what you guys are learning today, as difficult as it is really an opportunity to keep the kids in our community safer. And that is going to be through having these difficult conversations. So I made a couple of notes of things that I wanted to highlight that really is not designed to shock you. What it's designed to do is get you to understand when we as adults or as parents say, I don't understand how a kid could feel responsible for how this happened. To getting us to be able to engage in that dialogue better as trusted adults. So a couple of things I wanted to highlight was that, specifically in this story, one of the kids felt like they were recruiting others in the definition that we would give as adults or as law enforcement, not from the kid's perspective, and that they felt culpable for what was going on and what was happening to their friends. So this really highlights what happens on a local level. One of the biggest questions that I get in the community all the time, because most people know what I do for work and what I've done for work, they will ask me, especially if they hear a story like this on the news, or if they have an interaction with their own family, or a kid comes home from school and tells their parents about something that happened. Hey, I heard that Johnny or Jill experienced this last weekend. Can you believe how horrible this is? So I'll get asked, you have kids. How do you parent? How do you keep your kids safe? You know, I'm no different than anybody else, right? I have the same fears, the same anxieties, the same stressors that everybody else does. So I try to be as honest with people as possible. And it was one thing I really wanted to highlight while I was up here, because it kind of gives a, well, certainly my perspective. I have a kindergartner and I have a third grader. And they go to school, they come home. There are some things that maybe they don't experience that other kids do, like sleepovers, for example. My kids don't go on sleepovers. There's no home that I'm comfortable with, that I'm at, that I'm gonna let my kids go to. I don't have supervision over them. So that is one example of how I keep my kids safe. And I don't know how that's gonna change as my wife and I continue to raise our children and they get older and want to experience more and travel more and go out more. But people are always shocked by my response to them when they ask me, you know, your kids don't go on sleepovers. And I'm like, no, is that really that strange? Is that weird? We don't think so. If kids want to hang out at our house or something like that, or we take our kindergartner to a birthday party a couple weeks ago, my wife or I are there the whole time. There was never a point in time during the week, during the day, during a month that somebody can ask me, hey, do you know where your kids are right now? Yes, 100% yes, all the time. Right now, both of my children are with my wife in our backyard, because I got a text message about 15 minutes ago when I saw a picture. I know exactly where my kids are all the time, versus as a law enforcement officer, do you know how many times I interact with a child and I call their parents and I'm like, hey, do you know where your kids are right now? No. All right, well, your child's 11. Do you think you should know where your kid is right now? I don't know. So these are the kinds of things that I think we as a community can certainly engage in dialogue and talking to each other and letting them know, you know, the best thing to prevent something like this from happening to the youth in our communities is just simply by talking to each other, to our kids, knowing where they are, knowing who has access. And that includes access on the internet, access online, cell phones, applications, all of that stuff, all the stuff that we've been hearing about all day. Did I hit everything you wanted me to touch on?
You and I were speaking earlier, we talked about in order for a child to be abused, there needs to be three things. There needs to be an adult who has the inclination to abuse,
yep,
which we have no control over. There needs to be a vulnerable child.
Yep.
And yes, some children are more vulnerable than others, but I don't know a human being that isn't vulnerable, right?
Right.
And then the third thing is access, which you talked about. And as your children are little, nobody's gonna have access to your child, which is why you do the sleepover thing. I did the same thing when my kids were little.
Yeah.
They could come over to our house was the fun house, but if there was roller skating or there was movies, I was that creepy parent in the back of the movie watching, so I know exactly what was happening with my children.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to, you know, there's a lot of great information out there, the conscious parent, parenting with love and logic, there's some great help out there. But if parents aren't doing that, to your point that you just said, that's where the community comes in. It's not just your child, but your child is my child too, and it's my responsibility to keep my eye out for your child, and your child, and your child, and your child. And if we all hold that responsibility, then we have a greater chance of blocking that access and preventing more children from being abused.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I
Thank you.
appreciate you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're in the final stretches. Thank you for those of you who've been so patient. It's been a long day, lots of information, different kinds of people, different ways of presenting. I felt like today's been so holistic and super groovy. So now Allison's going to take the stage again, which is always a delight. And she's going to talk for about an hour and a half, and then we're going to answer your questions. Thank you to those who put those questions back there. So when she's done, we'll have our speakers come up, and we'll answer any questions that you guys have and the ones that you wrote. So Allison, you take the stage.
And it probably will not take a full hour to answer the questions. So we'll be doing this, doing the Q&A, and then having a little bit of sunshine.
Yes, sunshine.
For some self-care.
Sunshine.
Who knew? We've been talking today a lot about what the problem is. So I'm gonna try to shift into like what we can do about it and what are some action steps. So we leave here with that hope is a verb. And hope is a verb is a term that I stole from Patty Wetterling, Jacob's mom. She talked about when you're hopeful about something, you have to do something about it. And just a self-check. We've had a lot of stuff going on today. A reminder, we wanna make sure that we can breathe before we help the people around us breathe. And so if you need to stand and listen, if you need to move and listen, whatever you need to do, feel free to do that, because we just have a lot going on and we wanna make sure that we're breathing. And those moments of centering and reminding ourselves that there are more good people out there than people trying to cause harm can be really helpful. As I said in my first presentation, October 22nd, 1989 is the day that Jacob was taken from us. And that is why the work that we do at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center is grounded in prevention. And I had a very amazing moment earlier today. I went, my child and my mom met us here for lunch. We went in and we heard the children's choir singing, which was amazing. And they were singing one of Jacob's favorite songs. And I was like, how do they know? They were singing a song by Red Grammer, who he actually came and sang at Jacob's funeral. One of the Red Grammer songs was played on the radio on the hour, every hour, the week after Jacob was taken, in hope that he would hear the song. And I was like, what are the odds that I'm here in Maine and a kid's choir is singing a song from that album? Like, goosebumps moment. And it's one of those things that is beyond what I can understand. There's a lot of things beyond my understanding that I just have a moment. And it was one of those pieces where everything coming together. And I did text Jacob's mom and I said, just so you know, I'm out here in Maine and they're singing a song by Red Grammer. She said, that is the highlight of my week. Like that, hearing that is just the highlight of my week. So knowing that the choices that we make, we don't always know how they're healing other people. We don't always know where that ripple effects goes. I doubt that the kids in Maine whose parents are dropping them off to sing for a thing have any idea that they're providing some heart-warming moments to a family in Minnesota. But that's just the way of the world. We never know how things move. So Douglas Wood, who is also the author of Old Turtle, I don't know if you know that phenomenal children's book, but he wrote a song for Jacob, and he says in the song, there's a dream that we dream how the world should be, where children are safe, where children are free. But if we want this to happen, we must make it so, for we are Jacob's hope. And Patty said, if I was gonna hope that Jacob was found, I couldn't just sit back and hope. I had to roll up my sleeves and hope. And so hope is a verb, and every day we do that verb. This is Patty and Jerry Wetterling, Jacob's parents. And when we left our middle school, North Middle School in St. Cloud, we planted a little tree in front of the school in honor of Jacob. And every year when I go home, I see this tree is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And for some, it's sad to see the tree because it's a passage of time of the 33 years that we've had without Jacob. But it's also a sign of hope. It's a sign of growth, and it's a sign of goodness. And as I said, Patty was our PTA president. Jerry was the president of NAACP. They were good at getting people involved. They were good at getting people activated. And what is more activating than the safety of kids? But the funny thing is, Patty said, it is really hard to get people to come in the door to listen about sexual abuse prevention, because no one wants to imagine it happening to their kid. It's really hard to get people through the door to talk about online exploitation, because no one wants to imagine it happening to their kid. She said, I was a mom of 4 kids. If we would have had a speaker coming about sexual abuse prevention, I wouldn't have gone. She's like, I don't want to think about that. I don't know the words, I don't know the terms, and it's until it's at your front door. And that's why I love when faith communities, youth serving organizations take policies and procedures before there's a problem. And they say, yes, we want a speaker to come and talk about this before we have an issue. But we see hope in action through this family, and we see the work that they do, and they continue to inspire. Patty's tradition every October 22nd is to bake cookies and bring them to the sheriff's department. That's just what she did every year when Jacob was missing. She'd be like, we're still here. We're still looking. Thank you for caring. Today, her daughter sent me a picture of all the cookies that they were making to bring over. That's just their October 22nd tradition. The calendar carries weight with it. And we don't always know. I don't know if you've had the experience, you're like, why do I feel so horrible? And then you look at the calendar and you're like, oh, because it's the date that this thing happened, that this person I love died, and we can reclaim those dates and figure out how to make those dates full of hope and full of goodness. I talked in the morning a lot about internet safety, and I was sort of talking about general, but also being aware that there are some kids who are farther along on the spectrum who've gotten to where their behavior really needs trauma therapy, addiction therapy. And these are just some of the pieces of, if you're at a place past sort of that yellow light, you're wearing that red light, that there are resources for you if your child is actually experiencing addiction. Move my little water bottle over a little bit here. Okay. And helping our young people with basic action steps. I love with little ones, first, second, third graders, I have them write down a list of what are things that you do when you're really mad or upset that don't involve technology. Because we want to start when they're young of learning when we're mad and upset, step away from the computer. Maybe it's going for a run. Maybe it's listening to good music. Maybe it's talking to a friend. We can start those young with our kids because when people are mad and they go to technology, that's when we have the most harm committed. And we as adults have to own that that's a pattern that we sometimes engage in and step away from that pattern. I have to tell this story. My child was here earlier today. You may have seen her. She just came in for lunch. My child accidentally went viral for her 3rd birthday. So we was in the middle of COVID. She wanted a big birthday party. I said, no, we can't have a big birthday party. It's COVID. She said, well, could we please have a donkey? I'd really like a live donkey when I turn 3. Yeah, no, not going to happen. So I killed her dreams twice. She wanted to go to Bethlehem with Mary and Joseph, as you do. So she wanted a donkey. Not going to happen. Her 3rd birthday request was a hot air balloon ride. No. A death trap, like for a 3-year-old, it's like a ball of fire in a basket. No, not happening. So finally she said, well, can I have a really cool cake? I said, absolutely, any cake you want. I've already killed 3 dreams. And she said, I would love a Lion King cake. It was her favorite movie at the time. But I want Mufasa to be dead so that everyone will be so sad when they see the cake, no one else will want to eat it. And I can have it all to myself. 3-year-old logic, right? Like if you've worked with kids that age, everything is very much like, this is me, this is the world. I was like, yes, we will do the Mufasa cake. 3 adults were invited to her birthday, my brother, her godfather, and his wife. No children saw the cake. No children were harmed by the cake. She shared the cake. She licked the frosting off her piece, gave the other pieces away. Not a big deal. I took some pictures, sent it to my younger brother, who's a comedian, actor in Los Angeles. She'd been in his wedding earlier in the month, and she'd been telling people about her dead Mufasa cake. And he said, do I have your permission to tweet this out? Consent, right? He said, this is hilarious. My friends at the wedding would love to see it. Sure, no problem. I didn't realize it was a big deal till later that night when her godmother, one of my best friends, works at Disney World. She's an animal keeper, animal trainer. She's like, your daughter's on the Disney Facebook employees page with this Mufasa cake. I was like, we had the party 3 hours. Like, what? It became a big deal. We had 54 million people view the tweet because my brother gets like the data. Just this morning, every time I think it's dead, it's not. This morning it was shared on Bat Dad Comedy, which is a comedy page. My friend tagged me in it. Every time I think it's gonna be done, it's not done. That's the thing about going viral. Every time you think it's done, it's not done. 54 million people saw it. I had about 60 people send me really mean messages. 60 out of 54 million, but that's a lot for me to navigate with, like, your child is horrible, your child is selfish, you're a bad parent, don't let her be around animals, she's probably gonna grow up and be a sociopath. Like all this, serial killer kinds of things. I'm like, I teach empathy for a living. I do empathy workshops. I'm really okay. She's an empathetic kid, and people are like, this child probably doesn't even go to church. I was like, calm down, she's 3. Let's not cyberbully a 3-year-old, she's fine. And it was very hard because you don't want to engage online, but it's your 3-year-old. So it was very sweet seeing like people being like, Allison was my confirmation teacher when I was 15. 20 years ago. Her kids are great, leave her alone. Like, I was like, thank you, Matt. Hope you're doing well. Like, but I use this as an example when I talk to kids about the difference between reputation and character. People can see an image of us, see a picture of us, and jump to conclusions about our reputation. We can't control that. We can completely control our character, how we treat other people, the way that we act towards other people. And so that idea of so many people seeing this image and being like, I can't believe this child didn't share. What a horrible parent. This is what's wrong with parents today. They say yes to everything. I'm like, I said no to the donkey. I said no to the hot air balloon. You have no idea. But just that idea of that we jump to conclusions based on an image. And the kids are okay. And so sometimes we don't want to jump to conclusions. If kids are engaging in media, give them characters with character to engage in. Always watch the movie first because you know your culture best. You know the kids best. You might be watching a movie and being like, oh, didn't know this was in here. Penelope has a pig nose. Will she ever find love? I'm not going to tell you. Billy Elliot just wants to dance, but he's in a community where boxing is important. Will he ever find the love of the dance? You'll have to watch. Akilah and the Bee. She wants to be in the spelling bee, but she needs a mentor. Will the crabby mentor from her community step up and mentor her? Let's find out, right? So these are more dated movies from my high school, junior high years. But if we're going to engage in media, let's use it as discussion, yet let's use it as springboard. Let's use it to our advantage. Lots of different resources out there to help springboard conversations between you and the kids in your lives. ConnectSafely.org has good information. Common Sense Media has great information. Thorn has phenomenal information. This is actually Ashton Kutcher and Demi Moore's group. They started a nonprofit to reduce child sexual abuse material on the internet. And they have great new resources for parents on how to talk to kids about sextortion, how to talk to kids about sexual images that are based on research and aren't scary. Scared kids aren't smarter kids. We don't want to scare our kids to death. And so empowering kids with information. Great books out there for older kids talking about consent, little ones talking about body boundaries, consent and respect. This is one of my child's favorite books. And then she'll be like, it talks about body boundaries, so I'll be combing her hair. She's like, I don't like how you comb my hair, and I have a body boundary. And I was like, yes, but it also says that if we're keeping kids clean and healthy, sometimes, we get in these dialogues about things like that. It's very important to have that body boundary piece. Other books to read with kids, Barbara Colorado, I've mentioned her a few times. Great book resources around bullying behavior. Words Wound is a workbook for kids with a lot of places to write about cyberbullying. And just great resources to know and to have when we think about books. Unselfie, I find it super interesting. If you have your cell phone out at the dinner table, you're not even checking it, but it's out on the table, it immediately decreases the level of content that you're having with someone. I know that there's a lot of people like Generation Z who play the game where you put your phone out on the table in a pile. The first one who reaches for theirs has to pay the bill. That's an idea, right? To think about how to make those contact moments, how we can demonstrate that contact piece. When we talk about hope as a verb, we talk about living what we want to live. Jacob wore the number 11 as his soccer jersey. And when we were going through trial, a friend of mine who lives in DC, who works at the National Center for Missing Children, Maura O'Rourke, who's lovely, she called and she said, I know you have a lot going on. Can you tell me what Jacob's soccer jersey number was? I said, yeah, it was an 11. She said, would it be appropriate if the kids on the soccer team that I coach, if we wore an 11 on our faces today in honor of Jacob? It was the first time I had smiled in a long time, because it wasn't people asking how he died, it was people asking how he lived. And when we focus on the horrible, the rare, the things that scare us to death, that doesn't move us toward anything. And so we sat down with Jacob's parents and his siblings and my colleague Jane. We made a list of 11 things that Jacob was when he was with us. The number one trait for Jacob was fair. He wanted things to be fair. I think it's because he was an athlete. It's more fun when things are fair. But he's always interrupting and coming home being like, Mom, this thing happened today. It wasn't fair. It wasn't even about him. But he's had a strong sense of fairness, being kind, being understanding. And so, a lot of kids in Minnesota wear an 11 patch on their helmet or other things in his honor. The Twins, the Vikings, the Lynx, the Wild, a lot of different groups, the Roller Girls. They all got involved in finding different ways to live by this 11. But it's not just wearing a soccer jersey number. It's saying, I'm going to put on this 11, and I'm going to be kind to other people. I'm going to put on this 11, and I'm going to be understanding. And Jacob's dad talks about if one person puts on their jersey and makes that decision, that's going to have a positive ripple effect. We do so good at catching kids doing the wrong thing, we forget to catch them doing the right thing. And so this is the way that we celebrate that legacy. And I look at, Jacob's life had just started, and somebody came and ripped out the last chapters. And I don't want the offender to have the ability to end his story. So we get to rewrite the end of his story as we live out the 11. And someone just buying someone else coffee and saying, well, it's a part of 11 for Jacob. Or there's a staircase at one of the schools in Minnesota where every stair has one of the 11. And so you go into the school thinking about how you're going to live this way. It's a way of promoting what's good. If we print this off and put it by our laptops, are we going to be more understanding in our conversations with others? These are some of the resources I talked about this morning, but I just want to make sure that they were on a slide for folks. Because it comes down to if we don't stand up for kids, we don't stand up for much. And this is all about today, standing up for kids. In personal safety work, not just internet safety work, there's so many myths. And fear freezes us. Again, scared kids aren't smart kids. We don't want to scare our kids to death. People say, well, I don't want my kids to learn internet safety. I don't want my kids to learn personal safety because I don't want to scare them. It's how you teach. We don't teach fire safety by saying, here's what a 3rd-degree burn feels like on your body. No. Horrifying. We say in our family, we don't play with matches. If someone wants you to play with matches, come tell me. Let's do a what if around matches. What if you're playing outside and an older kid wants to play with matches? Let's practice. Same thing with body safety. We don't say to our little ones, let's sit down and watch Law & Order SVU together. When Olivia's talking, has that ever happened to you? No, not helpful. We say, you know what? If someone wants to keep a secret about touches, or if someone wants to keep a secret about what you're doing online, we don't keep secrets from the person who takes care of us. Come and check in with me. Side note, I did learn from kids. I was training little Boy Scouts. We're talking about secrets. This little boy raised his hand and goes, my mom is turning 40 next week. We're planning a huge party for her. Cake, balloons, I'm not supposed to say anything until next week. Is that against the safety rules? I was like, oh, I don't want kids to be like, remember we had fun before we met Allison? Like, remember when we had celebrations before we met Allison? So we teach the kids the difference between secrets and surprises. Secrets you're being asked not to tell, not okay. Surprises are very short. We all know when we're gonna find out. They make us happy and we get to all find out together. So that I'm not like destroying holidays. And anyone who does this work, I know we have people in this room who do this work, you feel like I've heard everything, then a kid raises their hand, you're like, oh, I have not. Right, yes. So that was one of those things. So education moves us to act. Cordelia, who's one of my heroes in this movement, she says, in this culture, we believe if we don't talk about painful things, they'll go away, which is the basis of abuse in the first place, secrecy and shame. We have to turn on the lights. We have to make this easy to talk about. I know so many clients who say, I didn't tell because I did it wrong. Guess what? You're in 4th grade. You didn't do it wrong. Well, I've been taught to kick and punch and poke, and I knew this person, I cared about this person, and I just froze up. Our bodies do that when we're scared. Our bodies do that online when we're scared. It's not your fault. It's never, ever, 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 ever the kid's fault. And you have every right to tell somebody. Kids are seen as the ideal victims. We've talked about that. And so we need to do a good job of being those eyes and ears for kids, as well as giving them enough information so they can say, this doesn't feel right, so here's what I'm going to do about it. I was teaching high school sex ed as a part of my job at church. Every January was Sex Ed Month. We'd put out a thing so that parents would know if they didn't want their kid to come, that's fine. I would see more kids in January than see in the rest of the year because parents were like, oh, it's January, get to church, let's, here we go. But I would have all these kids, and I had a 9th grader who had no idea what I was talking about. No, and it was a group of us teaching, not just me, but like had never heard of sex, had never heard the context of sex. And I was thinking as I was teaching, like, this parent is gonna be so mad, what is going on? So afterwards I called mom and I said, your son has no idea what I'm talking about. She said, yeah, the pediatrician said, wait until he starts asking. He's just never asked. And he's in 9th grade. And I said, oh my goodness, okay, we have a lot of catching up to do. Let me help you with that because I don't want his information to come from kids in the back of the school bus, right? Like that was that's where I heard all the things when I was a kid, like, what? And I'd come home and be like, Mom, is it true that? And she'd be like, oh, what was said on the school bus, right? I want kids to get good information from their parents. And a part of that is equipping kids with good information. We know that there are children who are abused at home. We know that there are children who are abused by a trusted adult. We know that there are children who are being abused online. The first part of prevention is admitting that we have a problem. These are the kids where it was screened in, where they had enough information to screen them in, where there was enough information to someone pick up the phone. And we know that there are kids everywhere who are being missed. And so it's not just about asking kids to build their net of 5. A big part of hope being a verb is us being the net for kids. I was speaking to parents of high schoolers about online safety. I had a mom raise her hand and said, I've agreed with everything you said so far except this part. What? I don't agree. It's my job to get my kids safely through high school. It's not my job to get 4 of his friends safely through high school. I was like, oh, good. And we're trying to work through this with her about like community and whatever, and she was not buying it. And finally, what I ended up saying was, if you are trying to get your kids safely through high school, it's really good to know 4 of his friends. If you're the person who gets the call being like, can you pick up the kids from the school dance? Absolutely, yes, I will. If you have the dining room table that they want to hang out around, awesome. We want to build a community that it's safe for kids to exist. And our 2 building blocks about prevention starts really young is consent and empathy. And some people push back on consent because they say, Allison, are you teaching kids sex ed at a very young age? I said, consent is about making sure that people around me feel safe in their bodies. It's about teaching kids to make sure that people around them feel safe in their bodies. When they're 3 years old and they're playing at the playground and they fall off the slide, you say, do you want a hug or do you need your space? That's the basis of consent. When we say, don't pull the dog's tail, don't pull the dog's tail, don't pull the dog's tail, that's teaching kids consent. It grows as kids grow into respecting no's, listening to boundaries, making sure people feel safe around us. But it starts young, and it starts with kids also knowing they can say no about their body. If they don't want to hug someone goodnight, that's okay. We'll do a hug another time. Grandparents can be some of our best champions in consent building once we get them on our team. Listen, my child loves you so much that if when they say they don't want to give you a kiss goodnight and you respect that, then when someone else who they have less of a connection to pushes back on that, they think even my grandparents respect that. So I want you to help me because you are so important in their lives to helping the kids learn that they have body autonomy. And they can be some of the best champions when they're on board with that. Empathy is teaching kids to understand what they have common with other people. The sad thing, depending on how you look at it, maybe it's good, maybe it's sad, is that kids feel more empathy for people they relate to, people they look like, people of their same religion, people from their same neighborhood, people from their same school. It's more challenging to have empathy for people that we don't know. And so we need to continue to humanize people who otherwise there might be a disconnect. Yes, you and this kiddo are from different schools, but you both love Pokemon, right? You and this kiddo are of different faith, but you both love the same song. We need to help build those moments of connection because it is harder to hurt somebody when we believe that we imagine what they might be going through. And that's a big part of parenting. One of the phrases I have borrowed from the internet that I use all the time is all bodies are good bodies. Mom, can you believe that that person is walking with a cane? What does that mean? Well, all bodies are good bodies, and that person uses a cane to move forward with their body. Do you have any other questions about that? We want to make sure that they can relate and connect to people who are different from them, and it starts by us modeling that. And it starts by us being aware and continuing to be learners of different cultures, different faiths, different kinds of people. Interestingly enough, kids with high empathy scores also do better academically. So if you have a parent pushing back on social emotional learning and saying, I don't want my children to learn how to be kind to others, which is not common, but you can let them know that when they are building those hope pieces and building the way of seeing the world, that helps them in their ability to retain. Kids learn from parents, birth to 5, so important with those little developing brains and all the things they learn from parents. When I was pregnant, I was talking to 2 of my colleagues, and I said, I don't know why everyone says that pregnant people cry all the time. I've been just fine. I had no issues. I don't know why people said that. That day, We're at a march for someone who was missing, raising awareness that she was missing. And I talked to the sheriff's daughter who was there at the march. I said, what do you do for a living? She's like, I'm an early childhood teacher. I teach birth to 3. I started sobbing. I was like, that's so beautiful. You're teaching kids sharing. You're teaching them how to connect. You're helping them with the bonds that they might not be getting at home. Oh, that's so beautiful. And I'm just sobbing. My colleagues are like, oh, you're fine? You're emotionally fine? I said, I would have sobbed about this regardless. It's so beautiful. She's like, all I ever hear is childcare costs so much money. That's what I always hear. She's like, I've never had someone sob at me about my job. I'm like, well, it might be that I'm in my last trimester, or it might be that your work is so beautiful. I think it's a bit of both. And I think we need to do a better job as a culture of honoring people working with birth to 5, because it is so critically important. And their work is so undervalued. And the building blocks that they're getting from early childhood about sharing, about consent, about being kind, about existing in community are a huge piece about hope. We also have to be empathetic with ourselves. Helpers can be the meanest to ourselves about asking for help. We need to make sure it's not just about moments of self-indulgence, which can be helpful, the bubble bath or those moments. It's about building up patterns of self-care. It's building up a culture where you can knock on your boss's door and say, I have an idea of how this can go better. Having your boss listen, that when we create a structure where we are valued and our opinions are valued, we're all better off. A big piece of building empathy is helping kids with perspective taking. That team just won the tournament. How do you think they feel? Oh yeah, in the movie, Molly had to stand up for Pepper to help her friend. How do you think it would be to do that? This family had to close down the restaurant. How do you think they'd be feeling? It's practiced, it's learned, and we can help model this for kids. See, I do know about empathy for all the people who think I don't. Anyone have any questions before I move forward about things we can do to reduce violence in our culture? Okay, if you have questions, stop me as I go.
What are some of the key ways that you found helpful for engaging families 0 birth to 5 in this work?
Sadly, the number one thing that I'm going to say the sad part, then I'll say the good part. The number one time that I have the most people gather to learn about this stuff is when a sex offender moves into the community, which is when it's like, oh, I've never had to think about this, and I've got the level 3 notice, so now I'm going to come and learn about it. But it's hard to educate when you have scared, terrified parents. And the thing is, that person's the tip of the iceberg. You're probably never going to interact with them. Their likelihood of reoffending is statistically very low when they're a level 3 because they have all these services poured into them. I'm worried about all the people that no one's told, so I try to use those moments to then spread out the awareness and say, you're here because of this person. Your child's more at risk by the people they meet when they go out your child's more at risk by the people they meet that you welcome into your home than the people they meet when they're playing in the neighborhood. And so we have to talk about that. And so that's where I get the most captive audience. But the birth to 5, part of it's all about building on strengths. I've had parents say, I'm worried that I'm going to come in here and you're going to tell me I'm doing a horrible job as a parent. I'm worried I'm going to come in here and you're going to scare me to death and make it hard for my kid to ever hug or high-five someone. So part of that is word of mouth. The more that we do this work, the more people say, oh, I heard Allison, she isn't scary. Part of it is video clips, part of it is brochures, things like that. But we usually have the most captive audience after there's a problem. It's like when there's an arrest made of a teacher, which is when that happens, that's when we get a captive. And I would like to get the captive audience before there's a problem. And so part of that is making this accessible and non-fear-based so that parents can hear it. I had a dad come up to me, because I do ECFE's presentations in Minnesota all the time, the early childhood stuff. And he says, I come and hear you every year for my yearly booster shot. I come and get my yearly booster shot of safety. And I love that image. Like, we do a Talk About Touches presentation for parents. Like, yeah, I'm just coming to get my yearly booster shot. And when they do go through it and it's positive and it's nuggets of good information that they can put into place that day, not just there's a problem, but how do we talk about it, that then brings them back. With classrooms, we want to model that in the classrooms. We want to practice, we want to teach that. And we want to support our teachers. If your kid is building your net of 5 and they say, Mrs. Warren is on my net, and you don't know Mrs. Warren, go introduce yourself. My kid says that you're amazing. I would love to learn more about what you do here. If it's one of the majority of teachers who are doing this work with little accolades to get that moment, that's huge. If it's someone with bad intentions, you're there the next day, you're like, my kid's talking about you. We haven't met. Here's my phone number. Let's chat. Like, also helpful. I talked about this before. Kids who read a lot tend to have higher empathy scores. So a good way of getting kids engaged in reading and art. But we don't do a good job talking about consent. There is that pushback of, well, I'm worried that if we talk about it, it's going to endorse them having sex earlier. Data does not support that at all. Data says when they have good information about their bodies, they make better choices. So let's give kids good information about their bodies. It isn't just about listening for a no, it's confirming the yes. It starts young and it's ongoing, and it's something that parents can talk to their kids about. And so people say, well, how do we talk to kids about this stuff in a way that doesn't scare them? The phrase that we always use is we talk about touches. We don't say good and bad, because science has told us kids who've been taught that curriculum are less likely to disclose because they feel like they've been bad. I've been touched in a bad way, I have to hide it. So we just say we talk, and also some sexual touch feels good, so very confusing for a kid. We just say we talk about touches. In our family, we talk about touches. I want you to know the names of your private parts. I want you to know that private parts are different from the rest of the body. You have permission to say no to anyone trying to get them to do something against their body safety rules. Now, with little ones, there are times when an adult might touch your private parts to keep you clean and healthy. If it's clean and healthy, we can tell anyone that we want to about it because we talk about touches. I was speaking to third graders, and a girl's doing this in the back row. I don't usually get this in this part of the presentation. So I'm like, okay, here we go, So we do a class called Empower Me. And so I'm going through this, and she raised her hand. She goes, I was at my friend's house, and a bee stung my butt. My friend's dad took the bee out. Can we talk about that? Was that okay? I said, let's talk about that, because we talk about touches. You as a kid don't have to figure out what the touch was. We just talk about touches. Did your uh-oh feeling go off that there was a problem? No, it only hurt in my bottom. It did not hurt in my uh-oh feeling. Valid. We're allowed to talk about it. Yeah. He called my mom. He said I'd been stung by a bee. She came over with an ice pack. We all talked about it together. I went home with my mom. That to me sounds like something that makes sense. It was clean and healthy, but you don't have to figure that out. So I'm glad you asked. If you're getting a bath and it's usually clean and healthy, and this person gave you a bath, you're not sure if it's clean and healthy, you can ask. You can talk about it because we talk about touches. So we want to talk if someone's trying to look at private parts, wants us to look at their private parts, is asking you to touch their own private parts, any of that, we talk about touches. And so we need to make that a part of our vocab young, even when we're diaper changing, just to start getting those words and making it easy to talk about. Clean and healthy touches are never a secret, so you can always talk if someone tries to trick you into a touch. If someone does trick them into a touch, it's never, ever, 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 ever their fault. Kids are not Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. They do not have to kick and punch and scream. That when it's someone you know and like, we often freeze. We sometimes, fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Freeze is often the response. Even if you freeze, no one has the right to hurt you. This is something else I don't do anymore. I used to talk about rabbits with little kids. And I say, when you walk by a rabbit, sometimes the rabbit freezes, sometimes the rabbit hops away. Either way, you leave it alone. Sometimes when someone makes us scared, we freeze or we run away. Either way, no one has the right to hurt us. But then it would derail because kids would be like, I have a rabbit. I saw a rabbit one day. There was a rabbit at the zoo once. I've read a book about a rabbit. And then I'm trying to get them back on body safety. And they're like, at the end, can we keep talking about rabbits? And so I've cut that out. We're back on the normal curriculum. But just that idea about we talk about touches. We don't teach anything related to strangers, because 93% of the time it's someone the kid knows and likes. But then I'll have the fifth graders being like, what about the white van? What about the white van? My mom has told me to avoid white vans. What about white vans? There are wonderful people who drive white vans. And then there's someone who might drive a white van who is breaking your safety rules. It is not the van. What is the person asking me to do? How do they make me feel? So it covers the very rare scenario of the white van, the 100 cases a year of non-family kidnappings. Then it covers the much bigger picture of the person driving up and saying, oh, you live in the neighborhood, you need a ride home. Doesn't matter who they are, the rules are the same for everyone. We just move away and say, sorry, I can't, I have to check first. Some kids are really good at saying no to adults. Other kids feel much more comfortable saying, sorry, I have to check first. Whatever works. In the 1980s, so much of violence prevention, when we started really trying to have words around this stuff, was focused on hardening the target, the tip of the iceberg. How many of you in driver's ed, raise of hands, were taught in driver's ed how to thread the keys through your hands so you could stab someone in the eye? That was session 1 of driver's ed for me. Yeah. It's like, okay, if you have your keys, thread them here. If someone's trying to grab your car, stab them in the eye, then throw the keys and run the other way. Like, well, I've never had to do that in my life. Do you still walk with your keys like that? Yeah, I still do too. Like, never had to do it in my life, but I'm ready. Hardening the target, telling someone to cover their glass, stick with the buddy system. Least effective, because we usually don't know where the target toward the end. It's a piece of the puzzle. The bigger prevention piece is bystander, upstander, and the piece of people acting out to not do any harm. So the example here, when I was in college, I was in charge of the Sexual Assault Resource Network my junior year. And I was told that I needed to go to all the dorms and talk about sexual assault. So I did that my junior year. I was in the cafeteria eating with my friends, and a first-year student walked by, and he looked at me, he looked at his friend, he goes, "I think that's the rape lady." I'm 20, okay? The rape lady. That's not what the name you want on the back of a sweatshirt. I'm sure those of you who do this work have been called similar, like, "Oh, I know that person. That's the touch lady," or whatever. The rape lady. I was like, no. And I realized one big lesson in that moment was that I was the only person that they connected to that issue. It's like the dangerous piece of, in youth ministry, we talk about the danger of light bulb model ministry, where you have a dark room and you have one person in the room who knows all the kids, who does all the things, who is doing all, and it's just them. When that light bulb burns out, when that light bulb goes on maternity leave, if that light bulb breaks a rule, we lose that whole group of kids. That we want to build track lighting in any of our youth serving organizations. So we have lots of lights who are engaged with different gifts and different talents. So it's not just on one person. So I realized, oh, I'd made this a light bulb model. So the next year, there was 15 people who were all seniors and juniors who I trained on sexual assault prevention. Then we went in the dorms in groups of 4. So we had people of different genders involved in different parts of the campus. We went in as teams. It wasn't the rape lady, but it was groups. So we're in a first-year dorm, and we're talking about alcohol and consent. And I was explaining if somebody is drunk, legally they can't consent. And so to step back and wait until you make sure that they're in a place where they can enthusiastically consent, and you're not wondering, are they sober, are they not, you know, whatever. I said, and a young man in the room raised his hand. He said, "Allison, is that very fair?" He said, "Imagine that I'm going to the firing range with my gun, and I'm looking for a target. And I pull out my gun, and I'm shooting at the target, and a drunk girl stumbles between my gun and the target, and I accidentally shoot her. Is it really my fault?" What? What does that have to, what? He said, well, you're going to a party. You're looking for someone to have sex with. A girl stumbles on you, so you have sex with her. Is it really your fault? Now, I'm of the personality where I'm like, there's no such thing as a stupid question. Ask away. I had nothing. I was just standing there with like my mouth on the floor being like, what? What? And so Seth, who I was co-presenting with, he was able to take that in a very different way because I was still just standing there being like, what? And he's like, well, first of all, it's just really concerning that you talk about like going to a party looking for a target. That makes me really uncomfortable. The fact that you think a penis is like a gun that just shoots off makes me really uncomfortable. And he was able to like unpack that while I was still just standing there being like, what? What? And so we think about hardening the target. I could tell girls at that party, like, cover your glass, stick with a buddy. Not the most festive message. We know all genders are targeted. It's about the person causing the harm being called out directly, being like, don't rape, don't assault. It's not just about like, don't do that. And that's done by the peers who go from bystander to upstander. It's the peer job as a community to say, don't do that in our community. Don't hurt kids. Don't hurt other people. We all deserve to be safe. And so whenever we think about sexual violence prevention, we want to go back to that kid at the confirmation retreat who's like, can I call that guy and tell him to stop asking you for the sexual pictures? It's less about her knowing what to do. It's more about us changing the culture. And I've talked about this before. More people seeing something happen, the less likely it is to help. And so we need to sometimes point it out with little kids. We say, if someone's trying to make you go somewhere without letting you check first, that's a problem. Doesn't matter who they are. Doesn't matter where you are. If someone's making you go somewhere without letting you check first, find any other grown-up and latch on. Because here's the thing. Really hard to pry kids off of things. Don't know if you know that. Don't know if you've had that experience. And if there's a group of 30 people and they're like, I don't know if I should be helping or not, and there's a child on their leg, they're engaged. They can't say this isn't theirs, right? There's a child on their leg. So that idea about reducing the diffusion of responsibility by teaching teenagers to point at someone and saying, I'm really uncomfortable here. Can you help me get someone else to help out? Because most people do want to help. They just need to know that they need help. RAIN uses the CARE model, and we talked about this yesterday with the students, that this is the model if you're trying to figure out how to go from bystander to upstander. You can create a distraction. Hey, your car's being towed. You can ask directly, ooh, this is starting to look really criminal. Are you trying to be really criminal? Is this creeping me out? If you know that person well. Refer to an authority. This is going on in here. We need some extra help. Enlist other people. And if we can give kids strategies, we can practice that. If we can practice that, all the better. This is a phenomenal story that I love. Central Kings Rural High School in Canada. A 9th grade boy showed up wearing a pink shirt. Not a big deal. Other 9th graders picked on him for wearing pink. So we go back to that triangle. We could tell him not to wear pink. Not super helpful. He should be able to wear pink. We can find the people causing the harm and say, what are you doing? But in this case, it was the seniors who owned the culture of their school who went home. And David and Travis went to Ragstock. They made calls. And the next day of school, every senior showed up wearing a pink shirt. This is actually from the neighboring school because they didn't have a camera the day that they all did it. But then they did a pink shirt day as well. But it's that idea about owning the culture. It shouldn't be on the people who are being victimized to be saying, hey, I'm being victimized. It's up to all of us to say, what more can we do? And that's why I love initiatives like what Catherine Ann's doing here in Maine of saying, I have one life, what am I gonna do with it? How am I gonna move from bystander to upstander? All the awesome sponsors that were read, all the people donating money to make today happen. I have one business, what am I gonna do with it? Right, we all have one life, what positive ripple effect can we create? This is just another example of 3 women who were out for drinks and they saw a man drugging someone else's wine. And they went into action. When she went to the bathroom, one of them followed her to say, and the woman's response in the article was, that's my best friend. Are you kidding me? That's my best friend. And sometimes it's the people that we have let into our circle who cause harm. It's not our fault. It doesn't say that we've done anything wrong. People victimize themselves when they feel like that they've let the wrong people in. Offenders are good at what they do. As soon as we realize what they're doing, we can respond. It doesn't make us a bad person. I've worked in sexual violence prevention for over 20 years, and I've had times when an arrest has been made public, and I'm like, obviously. Like when everyone's like, this person was the most well-loved person in our community. I'm like, of course they were, right? And then there's the person on the screen, and I'm like, I never would have, like that person, I worked with that person, I can't believe that person, you know? I miss it too. It's the fault is on the person causing the harm. And we can do what we can do with what we have. We have to include ourselves, though, and having empathy for ourselves. We can't be everything to all people. We can't be everybody's light bulb. We have to build track lighting around ourselves so that we don't burn out, because there is only one of us. And part of hope being a verb means surrounding ourselves with good people so we have people to lean on. Because there are times in this work you want to bang your head against the wall, sometimes every day. And to have someone that you can call can make a world of difference. So basics, when people think like, what can I do about this? How can I talk about this? Start with having a family safety night. The beginning and the end of every school year, we get together. Where do we meet in case of a tornado? What do we do in case of fire? Let's unplug the landline if we still have one and pretend we're calling 911, right? And at the same time, we talk about body safety and internet safety. So it's just a part of our family safety plan. Now, you know your kids well. I don't know if you can tell in our day together, but on the extrovert-introvert scale, I'm way over on the extrovert part of the extrovert-introvert scale. My older brother, who I love dearly, is as far on the introvert scale as I am on the extrovert scale. Like, I was the kid tap dancing in grocery stores growing up, and he was just like, stop. That's still our relationship. Like, that's, stop. That's how we do it. I'm imagining us doing a family safety night and me being like, what about this? What about that? I have this question. My brother just being like, stop. So you may want kids to write down their questions, fold them up, slide them in. If you have 3 kids, pretty obvious whose question is whose, but they might ask differently. You might want to have different family safety nights if you have a 5-year-old and a 15-year-old, because they have very different questions. Though it is awesome to have the 15-year-old help plan stuff for the 5-year-old, because teenagers do not want to be hypocrites. Anecdotally, I don't have the scientific research, but anecdotally, when high school kids work on information for little ones about not sending out things that they shouldn't send out, not cyberbullying, things like that, they are less likely to engage in those behaviors because they don't want to be a hypocrite. So having older kids engaged in the lessons can be really helpful. And there are some kids who are just naturally anxious. We talk about tornado safety in the next 10 weeks. They're like, is that a tornado? Is that a tornado? Is that a... One of the phrases for kids who are anxious is just, but what's our plan? We might never have a tornado, but I just want you to be stuck if we have one, so we have a plan. What's our plan? We meet in the basement. Yep, you have our plan, so we don't have to spin on it. We have our plan. You might never have to deal with this, but I just want you to have a plan. You might never meet someone who doesn't know the rules about safety, but I want you to have a plan if you do. Teach kids that most people do know the rules about safety. Patty and Jerry Wetterling were amazing because they let their kids go to football games, the other 3 kids. They let their kids have play dates. They let their kids have a childhood. And they said, this offender took Jacob. We're not going to let him take the childhood of our other 3 kids. That gave our parents permission to do the same. It's like, well, if the Wetterlings are letting their kids go to the football game, okay, you can go, right? We said to call and check in. That's ongoing. And so just that idea about most people do know the rules. You as a kid might meet people who have forgotten or ignoring the rules. If that happens, it isn't your fault, and I would want to know. I used the analogy yesterday with sports. If you're playing any sport, hockey, football, soccer, whatever, with people, and there's an adult playing with kids who doesn't know the rules, it is not your job as a kid to go up and explain the rules for football. That usually doesn't go well. A kid explaining the rules to an adult doesn't usually go well. Go off the field and find someone who does know the rules and say, this adult doesn't know the rules and someone's going to get hurt. You do not have to go in and engage. If you're meeting with someone online, if you're spending time online, you see someone engaging, trying to engage who doesn't know the rules about online behavior, you as a kid don't have to engage with them. You don't have to explain the rules. Get out of that room and go find someone who does know the rules. And so just like in sports, we don't have to be the one to do the rules, but we don't want anyone to get hurt, so we go and find someone who does. We talked about the teenage brain. And so because it is the last part of the brain to be done, that's going to say, what's the consequence? That means we lovingly walk our kids through consequences. I had a parent call our hotline and say, are you Allison, the one who does internet safety in the schools? I said, yep. Well, my daughter was sending pictures of herself in her sports bra to get attention, to be fun and flirtatious. Now she has to stay afterwards to talk to the dean of students about not sharing pictures of herself in her sports bra. Could you call the dean of students and tell me cancel the meeting? Because it sounds super awkward and there's way worse things out there than girls in sports bras. And I was like, how awesome is it that we're talking about this while she's still in a sports bra? That we're not wondering about, is this criminal, is this not? Is it gonna be prosecuted or not? Who's victimized or not? Let's just talk about the behavior while it's not gotten to that point yet. And that this is a gift. And that we're gonna have this meeting because trudging through the awkward, it can be a huge gift. But we have to do that lovingly and not in a way that's vindictive with our kids. We need to teach our kids about their gut instinct. And then we as parents have to listen to our own gut instinct. Don't leave your kids alone with people who make you feel uncomfortable. You don't need a logical reason. If your gut says something's wrong, pay attention. I was speaking at a level 3 sex offender meeting, and a mom came up to me afterwards and she said, I came here because I was really worried about the level 3 sex offender, but now I'm worried about my kid's karate coach. I said, tell me more about that, which is the good phrase to use as to learn more without judging. Tell me more about that. She said, well, there are a few things that make my gut instinct go off that make my husband and I really worried. The first one is that my daughter comes home and says how much he loves pinning people down in the class to show how strong he is. I was like, okay, my gut instinct's going off. She said the second thing is that he won't let parents swing in and watch the classes. He's, closed door, no windows, because he says that's distraction. So that's not good policy in use of organization. Windows are good, doors are good, like coming in a few minutes early to see what's going on, that's good. Checks and balances. She said, well, the thing my husband and I are really struggling with is when he brings the kids to tournaments in other cities, we're not allowed to stay in the same hotels as our kids because he says it undermines our authority. At this point, I'm like flagging the law enforcement officers who are doing the level 3. I'm like, can you guys come over here? We have a situation, right? She said, but Allison, I don't want to pull my kid out of karate because I want to make sure if she's ever abducted off the street, she can fight off the offender. And that is that jump for people where parents feel much more comfortable saying kick, punch, stab than saying you're allowed to say no to people that our family likes. And that's far more likely the issue. And if your gut is saying this feels wrong, live into that gut and make some calls. Ask what their policies are. they probably, hopefully, they have policies. If they don't, start helping get that work going, because we can listen to our gut, and then we need to follow that up with page 4, bullet point 6 says, grooming, when someone's trying to seduce a child for the point of abuse, takes time, access, and skill. So we want to reduce time alone with kids. We want to reduce access to kids. We want to increase our skills so they have a harder time getting away with it. Oddly enough, in our culture, the word grooming in the last few months has been hijacked to mean things that it doesn't mean. And when people take words that help keep kids safe and give it different meanings, that doesn't serve kids. So just to be really clear, when I say grooming, what I mean is adults with the intent to harm a kid sexually, separating them away from the people they love, pouring on attention and affection so that that kid doesn't feel like they can tell anybody. That is grooming. People are using it in weird ways, and it's confusing for families and kids. So just to be really clear, the greater skill that we have in finding those kids who are falling through the cracks and supporting them, the harder it is for offenders to cause that harm. But the goal of the predator is always the same. I want people to think, no way, not him, it isn't possible. Nathan Langston is a survivor of abuse by someone in his faith community. And he's done a phenomenal narrative of his story online, telleverything.art. And he talks about the fact that how much he blamed himself until his adulthood for his abuse. And the detective who worked with him said that's their goal. They want you to blame yourself because then you won't tell. And that's some of those first steps towards healing, is realizing it's not your fault. So thinking about who forms your net, how we can form other people's nets, that's the big part about being hope in the world, providing those pieces of hope for other people. I've talked about that already. What do I say to kids? We want to define if it's uncomfortable, tell them it's uncomfortable, or else they think they've done something wrong. Use a lot of what ifs. Ask them who their 5 adults are. When they're really little, they can trace their hand and draw those pictures. When they're older, they can put cell phones in their phone of those 5 people. Keep it upbeat and positive. It's not the talk. It's lots of little talks. Kids have very different questions when they're 12 than when they're 16. And if their friends are using a new app, they're going to have questions about that. But the goal is for them to come to you to talk about it and not other, and to have those moments. Start young. Kids' personal safety rules, as they're very young, is teaching kids to check first so that they don't have to figure out, is this person okay? Is the white van? Yes, no, whatever. We just check first before we get into any car. We check first before we go to any house. Now you know that's the rule. What if you're walking home from school and someone says, my cat just had kittens, come in and look? You move away from the person who's breaking your rule because they just might not know that that's your family safety rule. They might be a great person. They just might not know that's the rule, or they've forgotten the rules. You say, I have to go check first. We go check first, who takes care of us. We use the buddy system. We trust our gut. We don't keep secrets. We talked about secrets versus surprises. Family password. If we are in over our head and we need someone to come and pick us up, we use a family password. When they're very young, it can be used if you send someone to pick them up from school or swimming or whatever, so that person says, and your family password is this, your mom sent me, she's stuck with this, and I'm supposed to bring you home. The child knows if they have a family password, it's legit. When they're older, it's I'm in way over my head and I'm using the family password so you can come pick me up. If you're 16, you're providing childcare for someone and they come home intoxicated, and you as a 16-year-old don't know how to have the whole you can't drive me home because you're drunk conversation with adults. You could call and say, hey, Dad, da-da-da, family password. Oh, my dad thought he was supposed to pick me up. He's already on his way, and you're out of that trouble. This is a hard one for 4th through 6th graders, but super important. Adults ask other adults for help. If an adult approaches you for help, check first the person who takes care of you to make sure that it's okay, and that private parts are different from the rest of your body. We have about 100 to 115 cases of kidnappings in the United States every year. 115 too many, but it's very rare. And parents want to know, what do I do about that? Well, we teach kids that you don't go anywhere with anyone who doesn't let us check first. We teach kids you're more important than your stuff. If someone's trying to grab at your stuff, you go the other way. Leave your bike, leave your backpack. Making noise is a good thing. Some kids enjoy making noise better than other kids. We teach kids to yell and not scream. Think of the last time you were in Target and you heard a kid screaming. Did any of you run to see what they needed? Most of us are like, peace be with you in aisle 5. I'm moving to aisle 10. I'm not even gonna look. I know it's nap time. I feel your pain. I'm with you. You do you. We move away from screaming. If we yell from our gut, call 911. I need a grown-up to help me. This person's making me go with them. I need help. We are gonna get a better response. And then yell, not scream. Then we find any adult who can help us. Statistically, most adults help kids. So if someone's making us feel unsafe, we flag down anyone else. I talk to my kids all the time about finding a mom with kids. Statistically, that's your best bet, but anyone is better than the person breaking your rules. Any questions about that before I sort of launch into the last chunk? Okay. We know that most offenders use attention and affection to break rules. We've talked about that all day today. But be aware, they're not just using it against the kids, they're using it against the parents. They're using it against the community. And so we have to pay attention, and this is horrible, I hate to say it, pay attention to people who seem to like your kids more than you do. People who seem to like your kids more than you do is a big warning sign. And so pay attention to that and be aware that if that person is using that conditional love of I will love you if, that's problematic. We want kids to be able to use the internet in a healthy way. And they use that by practice, and they use that by making mistakes. So when they make a mistake, we don't want it to be a long-term mistake. We want to trudge them through the consequences of doing youth ministry. I had 2 kids who were in a texting battle back and forth. They're name calling, they're being really rude and mean and back and forth. I said, okay guys, let's sit in my office and figure this out. It was a teen boy and a teen girl. The young man said, well, can we sit in your office, but can we text? Because I don't want to look at her, I'm so mad. I said, no, we're gonna not use our phones. We're gonna sit and look at each other in the eyes and we're gonna feel bad. It's gonna be awkward because I don't want this to happen again. And if we don't have that moment of face-to-face and of repairing, it's gonna happen again. And so part of it is helping kids build unhealthy, reducing the unhealthy. When there's a problem, kids don't usually say there's a problem verbally. They disclose with their behaviors, with the emotions, with language. If your 13-year-old is slamming doors, doesn't want to be touched, isn't focusing, doesn't want to eat, might mean they're being abused, it might mean they turned 13, right? There might be a sudden shift in behavior because of something going on at school that has nothing to do with abuse. But if you're seeing those sudden shifts, it's a good time to say, I love you. I want you to be safe. I'm worried about you. Who are your 5 adults? Maybe you won't talk to me about it. You and Aunt Helen can go for coffee. Talk about what's going on. I want you to feel safe, and I want you to know there are a lot of people cheering you on. One of the main reasons kids don't tell if there's a problem is they're worried about being rejected. They're worried about not being believed. And so we can reduce that with what ifs so that the what ifs end positively. This might surprise no one here, but when they interviewed college students who had been abused as kids, how well they knew the perpetrator impacted their healing. If they knew that perpetrator really well, it was harder for them to heal because of the level of how many of their boundaries they had been broken. Victims of relatives had more PTSD symptoms if they delayed their disclosure, and if when they did delay or when they did tell, people didn't believe them. If a kid tells you they're being abused, start by believing. Statistically, they're telling the truth. And so start by believing and see where it goes from there. Kids feel like they know about online safety. We talked about savvy versus smart, more than they actually do when you give them scenarios. So really use that opportunity to build those connections. When you see things happening in the news, if your kid is old enough, hey, I saw this happening. What would you do if that was you or your friend? Let's do some skill building. Spread out the ownership. Not one light bulb. You can't be everywhere at once. Share that responsibility. In order to protect kids, we have to believe that abuse can happen. We need to talk about personal safety. We need to tell adults that kids have had training. We need to drop in at youth serving organizations. Be the volunteer. When there's the school field trip, yeah, I'll go. Offer training to caregivers and form other relationships with people doing this work, especially people with disabilities. People with disabilities are victimized at a higher rate than those without. And people with lived experience have a lot of lived experience in this is what has worked for me. Know that if you work with one person with autism, You've worked with one person with autism. You can't extrapolate those learnings into the whole community of people with autism. Everybody's unique and different, just like teenagers are unique and different. We can see themes, but it's the lived wisdom of those with disabilities who have the best suggestions when it comes to preventing abuse for people with disabilities. And the one thing I hear from parents over and over again is don't infantilize, I don't know if I said that word right, kids who are trying to learn about bodies. If someone has Down syndrome, read the same books about bodies as their peers. If so, give kids information. You might have to do it at a slower rate depending on the person. You might have to do it more accurately or more often. But don't say, I don't want to teach my kid this, because we want to give them enough skills to be able to engage in prevention. Our biggest prevention piece as we wrap up is adults who care about kids. That's huge. So form your net. Know that your being here matters today. We want to make healthy choices easy. We want to do that in leadership and in prevention. So we want to make healthy easy when we live in a culture where easy is usually fast and is not usually good. So we want to help dig in to make healthy easy. A lot of problems kids can handle on their own. If hurting is happening, we want to get adults involved. So that's sort of our litmus test for do we tell or do we not tell. There's a big sort of pushback in the abuse prevention community. There's been a lot of studies about resiliency. Healed people heal people. But there's this piece like, why are we spending all our time trying to figure out why people are helped to be resilient through abuse? Why can't we just end abuse? I think it's a both and. We have to study how can certain people be resilient through abuse and be able to thrive despite what's happened to them, as well as preventing it from happening in the first place. Kids who are engaged academically and in their school community, that builds their resilience. They learn there are other adults who are non-abusive. There are other people who want them to be well. One of my friends was abused by her dad growing up horrifically. She was at school the moment it opened to the time it closed. She was in every club. She was an overachiever, an A in everything. She didn't want to be home. And sometimes kids who are being abused might not fit what you think. It might be the overachiever. If they're dealing with violence in their community, resiliency, the 4 things that buffer their experience is having self-regulation, having the support of a loving family, having support of their school, and having support of their peers. The number one piece of resiliency is if they have one adult in their life who cares about them. Thank you for being those adults that care about them. One adult who wants them to be okay. Biggest piece of resiliency. So if you ever doubt you're making a difference, know that you are. Having one adult cheerleader, biggest piece of resiliency. Parents still want their kids to be kind is the number one thing. When you say, what do you want your child to be when they grow up? Number one thing parents say is kind. And we live in a very divided society. No, most parents want their children to grow up to be kind adults. That is huge. Tell your kids what you value. If you tell them, what did you do today that was kind for others? They're going to start looking for that. If you tell them in our family it's important that we go from bystander to upstander, let's practice, they're going to be more likely to do that. Book resources, one of my kids' safety books is called I Can Play It Safe. I always say, go to the kids' bookstore and find books you feel comfortable using. If you feel comfortable reading it, it will get read. Protecting the Gift is a great book by Gavin DeBecker about how to help kids listen to their gut instinct, but it is dated. One of my college interns was reading it and came up to me and said, Allison, what's a pager? They're talking about a pager in this book. What's a pager? I was like, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I will tell you what a pager is. So it came out a while ago, but the good information is still in there about how to listen to your gut. I've talked about these books earlier. And our big message here today, the core message, is if we don't stand up for kids, we don't stand up for much. And so every day we want to stand up for kids. Every day we want to do what we can in their own best interests. We want to live by the 11 for Jacob. We want to be fair, kind, understanding. Thank you for celebrating his memory in whatever way makes sense to you and your family. Thank you for being here on October 22nd to have that positive ripple effect. And thank you for all the people together to make this happen.
So here we are at the end of a day-and-a-half training here at beautiful St. Dominic's on a gorgeous fall day, October in Maine. And you guys deserve awards for being here today. So as we're going to end our day with the panel discussion, we have some of the questions that people wanted to know. the speakers that we've had throughout the day, and a couple of extra special superheroes locally. So I'm going to turn it over to our narrator, and she'll take it from here.
I'm Allison. We've been talking all day. I'm the director of the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center in Minnesota, one of the programs of Zero Abuse Project. I get to moderate today, which I'm excited about. If we don't mind to just go down the line, we'll start in the middle. We'll go like this. So, and to introduce yourself and say what agency you work for and what your role is, so parents here and parents at home can know who to contact if things come up. So go ahead.
Good afternoon. It's great to be here. My name is Jonathan Shapiro. I'm the director of the Maine School Safety Center. The Maine School Safety Center is an office within the Department of Education. The center was created just about 3 years ago now. We're a team of 6 individuals, and we're growing, projected to grow beyond that. We provide a number of services. We provide training, guidance, and technical support. And these services are open for all schools in the state of Maine, public, private, religious. So anyone that has a school can take advantage of these services. We have a school emergency management lane of service where we do emergency operation planning and work with the school to develop good emergency plans. We have a behavioral threat assessment program where we teach schools how to analyze a threat, whether or not how serious it is, and then the proper response to that. We also have a school safety and security lane where that lane predominantly focuses on making sure that the SROs are trained, as well as any other police officer that would be responding to a school. We've partnered with the Maine Criminal Justice Academy, and we help conduct the certification for SROs. And just recently we added restorative practices lane, where that individual would help a school that wanted to become a restorative school using non-punitive and a restorative way of dealing with challenging behaviors and disciplinary issues. We are currently putting on 3 workshops on how you can create a restorative, non-punitive code of conduct. Those are going to be in southern, central, and northern Maine, and those are starting in November. And we also have a training lane where we have a training coordinator which coordinates all of our trainings and assists us when we put on events similar to this. You can check us out on the website. Just Google Maine School Safety Center. Will pop up. Everything I said will be on there and a lot more information. So thank you.
Thanks for being here. Catherine, why don't you introduce yourself? Explain.
Okay. Catherine Ann Wilson, the founder of Stop Trafficking US. My nonprofit was started in 2015 as a survivor myself, was thriving in the community and wanted to be able to give back. How could I be a part of the solution? How could I prevent what had happened to me from happening to other children in my community? And the way I thought I could best do that is to be a bridge between resources and educators on various topics, if it's child sexual abuse, if it's through online, if it's through trauma training, if it's through meeting the needs of sex traffic survivors who are in residence in my community. More recently, the heart of what we've been doing is doing conferences. So this is our 4th statewide conference, our 2nd in person. Our claim to fame is a couple years ago. We worked with Jonathan's team and we educated 690 teachers, social workers, law enforcement, 90 prosecuting attorneys across the state. What is child sexual abuse? How to identify it online when virtual training was a thing. So I love being able to bring for free education for prevention to my Maine community. So that's what we do, and we're honored and humbled to be able to do it. Thank you.
My name is Jonathan Sarbeck. I'm the district attorney in Cumberland County. For the DAs across the state, our role in the process is basically a case will come to us from an investigation or from a referral from maybe schools or DHHS, and then we will basically look at that look at that case, and we will forward it to the Child Advocacy Center. For people who don't know, the CACs are they're kind of twofold with what their purpose is. One is they help out with forensic interviews of children when it comes to abuse. Forensic interview is much different than a regular interview that you would do with a quote-unquote victim of a crime, because children obviously are at a different developmental stage than adults. These forensic interviewers actually are highly trained when it comes to speaking with children, and what the idea is to really minimize the traumatization of those child victims when they come and get that interview. The other thing that the CAC does is that they work with a multidisciplinary team. Law enforcement, prosecutors are involved with safety planning, making sure that that child is safe, making sure that child has a place to go. And it's really one of these, the CACs are very vital partners when it comes to what the DA's offices do. And it's not just in Cumberland County, but throughout the state with the 8 district attorney's offices that we have. They all work with the CACs, and it's a much better approach to really try to protect children who have obviously gone through some terrible ordeals and terrible trauma, to try to minimize that, but also hold the perpetrators accountable who also do this. So we really try to take that approach, understanding with these types of cases what the child victims have gone through, and really trying to take an approach that's going to be best for them. And then as the case progresses through the criminal justice system, we speak for the victims in court and ultimately hold the offenders accountable for what they did.
I wanted to add to that. One of the cool things about the child advocacy centers that most people don't realize is that before the CACs, when a child was found to potentially have been abused, they would have to talk to a police officer and then talk to a lawyer, and then it was like having to re-victimize themselves over and over again. It was just an abusive process that child and family would have to go through. So the CAC is a warm and loving environment that is trauma-trained people. The forensic interviewers are taught how to not lead the child when they're talking about what had happened. It's recorded once, so they usually don't have to repeat what happened over and over again. It's really a kind and beautiful, if that could be such a thing, process for the child versus the traumatic way that they used to do it. In Maine, we have, how many do we have across the state now?
I think there's one per county.
There's one per county, which is great. And so this is spreading across the United States, just a way nicer way of helping children through that awful time in their lives. So it's really a beautiful process that we have here through the Cumberland County Child Advocacy Center. I just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Ryan Close, and I'm a sergeant with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office.
My name is Matt Fleming, a deputy with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office assigned to New Hampshire's ICAC task force as an electronic storage detection team K9 handler.
I'm Mike Pasenka. I'm the resident agent in charge for Homeland Security investigations in Manchester, New Hampshire. And I also have a name on the back of my sweatshirt. I'm the child pornography guy. Several years ago, I was at a family function with my mother, and I had an uncle there who I hadn't seen in some time, and my mother was talking to her brother, and she said, "Oh, Tom, Michael does child pornography now."
Oh, yikes!
That needs a little bit of background first before we go into that.
And interestingly enough, in the last 3 or 4 years, they've changed that term because people in our culture just use it all the time, like food porn and this. They now call it child sexual abuse images, child sexual abuse material, because that's really what it is.
Yeah, one thing to point out, though, you're going to hear on the federal system that it's still called child pornography under the federal statute.
Absolutely.
So the transitional shift took place about 5 years ago when the National Center recognized that the victims are non-consenting because of their age, whether they were groomed or not, and so it is considered child sex abuse material. In the state systems in most states, you can charge it as that. However, under the federal prosecutor's laws, you're required to charge it as child porn. And our argument would be nationally why they should have changed it and should change it is because you're normalizing the behavior.
Right.
Adult pornography is a $1 billion business that's taking place across the world, but that's not what kids are engaging in. They're not willing participants being compensated for their actions. So you make a great point. It's a tragic thing and not something that we take very lightly all across the boards.
Right. But we have all had the moment at the dinner party where it's like, what do you do for a living? You're like, do we tell the truth, right? Like, because we're going to be the Debbie Downers, like, but that idea of just how words shape our culture, it's so important. Great. Well, the first question we had, in a divorce situation, how do you make consistent rules with technology, especially when bringing in new step parents involved, you have different family members involved? Any suggestions there from those of you who are parents or those of you who just have worked in that context?
I think it depends on the relationship between the exes, right? So if you guys are on the same page and your marriage didn't work out, but you're still a family, that was how I was with my ex-husband. And we weren't able to have conversations about being on the same page. So it wasn't the ideal way of doing things. So the way I handled it was, when the children were with me, we had my rules. This isn't, the way I wish it would have been, but this is the way that it was. And so we had what we were allowed to look at, the rules for phones, the rules for what we watched for television, movies, bedtimes, everything was the way I felt was appropriate. And then my ex-husband did it the way he wanted it to do. And the kids learned to flow with that. So that's how, and I did things like, we had cassette tapes and we would listen to No the Seal, and we would listen to things in the car. And we would say, okay, what do you do if somebody tries to touch you? And we would have we normalized having conversations. We also normalized listening to different kinds of music. It was just a regular conversation. A penis was a penis, a vagina was a vagina, and there wasn't anything silly or anything about it. And we practiced, where the kids would yell, you're not my mom or dad, fire, whatever. And then who's the safe person? If we go into, when the kids were little, if we went into a store, as soon as we walked into the store, if you get separated, where's the safe person? Mm-hmm. And so we'd point out where that safe person was, and then we all knew where to, so that's sort of how we did our rules and stuff, even though it was two separate households.
Great. You want to go for it?
Yeah, I would just offer up, all of us on the stage are, in a way, unfortunately, aware of the dangers of the world. And it's because of what we've read and what we've seen and what we've worked on as part of our profession. So I think that the key thing is communication with regards to what's out there and education about what's out there, because to me, if you have certain rules, there's a very good reason why you have those rules, and it's most likely for the protection of your child. So if you had a parent on the other side that wasn't interested in going about those rules, I think that parent needs to be educated about why it's important. And I would hope that the parent on the other side, even if the relationship between the two parents has gone south, that there's still that love and that desire to protect your child that's there, and really trying to make sure that both parents are aware of the dangers. And that's why we have these rules, and that's why both parents should be consistent with how they allow their child to use an electronic device.
We can share this video with them.
Yeah, there you go.
Send this to your ex.
Anyone else want to say before I move on? And I would just say, sometimes having a third party and not you can be helpful. Like, read this book Dr. Anna Salter wrote about predators, or read this book by Gavin DeBecker, because then they come up with the ideas like, we should do this thing. You're like, oh. So having a third party can be helpful. All right, so next question. How does substance abuse play into the victimization of kids and teens? They might make poor decisions with a more severe lapse in judgment if they're under the influence. Undeletable, unaddictable. How do we address substance abuse as a community when it comes to prevention?
So I take that question and I look at it in two separate categories. The first being, how does substance abuse of a potential survivor, a teenager, an adolescent. The other thing I would highlight is adults that are using their children are therefore more at risk. I've investigated several cases where access and opportunity were given based on the situation being presented at home. And it doesn't have to be illicit drugs. It is still in 2022 very obvious that one of the most powerful drugs out there is alcohol. And people who are experiencing problems with alcohol can, be passed out or unconscious for several hours. Who's watching your children during that time? Who has access to your children during that time? So I look at it twofold. Obviously, I thought the presentation that you gave earlier, talking to college kids about, intoxicated consent was very powerful and very, very meaningful conversation. So I would just I would ask people that they keep those two things separate, but in mind that it's not just the substance use of a child or an adolescent or a teenager, but also that of a caregiver and what that presents in terms of danger and access.
We see substance addiction in a lot of our human trafficking investigations. We view addiction as the primary vulnerability that we're seeing in our victims of human trafficking. So someone who's if you know anything about addiction, you know that someone who's addicted will do anything that they can they become very desperate. They do anything that they can to feed their addiction. That might be stealing from family members, but when that opportunity isn't there anymore, it could resort to prostitution or commercial sex activity, sex work, and where there's that kind of vulnerability, there's a trafficker out there who's going to capitalize on that, who's going to exploit that. So we see it all the time in our human trafficking investigations, and so what we do is we work with the victim at the very beginning, because we know that if we don't get the victim in a stabilized condition, if we don't treat this addiction, that not only is the exploitation going to continue, but that we're never going to be able to hold the trafficker accountable. And we find that traffickers use addiction to segregate their victims and truly control their activity. So and it's not just controlling that addiction. There's also a large amount of violence that go hand in hand with these types of cases. So that's the opioid epidemic is truly raging in New Hampshire and in Maine, and that's one of the ways that we're addressing that problem is through our human trafficking investigations.
I can say one thing. Sometimes with substance use, unfortunately, especially teens, they make decisions that they regret. But nowadays, with how easy exploitation can occur when it comes to photographs being taken or videos being taken, one bad move or one bad night can really have that detrimental effect where somebody gets something on somebody, either through form of video or photos, and that really kind of draws that person into that trap and begins that exploitation. So I think one of the things that parents need to do is have honest conversations with their children about if the children get into a situation where they do have or bad decisions are made or something happens to them while they're passed out because of substance use, that the parents open it up to their children to make sure that before it gets worse, that the parents are very open to talking to the children and helping the children so that they know that they can come forward and talk to an adult or talk to a trusted individual who's going to help them out so that exploitation doesn't continue.
And we see with grooming where the groomers will try to get kids to do alcohol or other things so that the child wants to keep the abuse secret. If I tell about the abuse, they're also going to find out about the drinking, and to let kids know that you want to know what's going on, just as you were saying. So lines of communication, great. How do you deal with a third party's involvement in sextortion? For example, an ex-boyfriend is blackmailing a girl with a naked photo, threatening to share on the internet, where then a perpetrator could get it. How would you deal with that third party being involved?
I'll start off with that one. We investigate the third party. I mean, sextortion is a crime. And if it's, you might be able to speak to violations of state law at the federal level. We've used statutes such as stalking in order to hold someone, a sextorter, someone who's the third party, the responsible party, to hold them accountable for that kind of activity. We've also used the child sexual abuse imagery statute, and we've used just the common extortion, using threats to force somebody to act a certain way or to provide certain goods.
Yeah, from a prosecutor's perspective, people in law enforcement can only do so much if it's reported to them. And that's, I think, the key aspect of if there is a third party that we need to hear about it from a law enforcement perspective so we can try to help. Just as there are federal laws, there are also state laws that can be utilized. And they're very specific to whatever's happening, to the age, to the actual action, to the devices used. We will look at this. We will try to do our best to help out victims as much as possible. But if it's not reported to us, then we can't help. And so I think that that's really the key thing, is to make sure that somebody is getting law enforcement involved or taking that step to somebody who can help, because if it's kept in the dark, then it never comes to light, and that's when the continued danger could happen.
Shame and embarrassment and fear prevent children and young adults from disclosing. And I remember being in Hannaford's and seeing somebody over at the fish counter with a black sweatshirt that said, "Do the world a favor, kill a pedophile." And I said, "I get your shirt." I talked to him and I said, "I totally understand your shirt. I totally understand. But the children in your life who see that, if their person who's offending them is somebody that they love and care about, and we know that the odds are that it's somebody they know and care about, they don't want Uncle Fred or Aunt Susie or Dad or Grandpa to be killed. They just want that person that they know and trust that's sexually abusing them to stop." So if we have to be careful of our languaging, and you talked so much about this, Allison, earlier, and I love that, we have to be careful what we say so that we create the opportunity for kiddos and young adults to come to us and tell us that something's happened. I went to a party, I drank some alcohol, I woke up, my clothes were off, I really don't know what happened, I'm getting flashes, this person sending me, telling me they're gonna share these pictures. They need to be able to tell a trusted adult, but they're not going to tell that trusted adult if they think that if the trusted adult is saying things like, "I would kick his butt, I would do this, I would chop off this," and I see that on my Stop Trafficking US Facebook page, and I'm like, you share an arrest, and they're like, "This should happen to them in prison," and I'm like, I hope you don't speak like this in front of your children, because they're not going to want to disclose to you if you do. We have to create that safe space.
The only thing I would add is that when it's first reported to us, we are going to try to figure out who the person is and what the relationship is. Oftentimes with this kind of behavior, we're going to treat it a lot differently if it's a teenager, a peer-to-peer type thing, and recognizing the support systems are already in place. Getting somebody involved in the criminal justice system as a juvenile because of a poor decision that they made is not always going to be our first choice. We may find out that they're part of an athletic organization, they're highly engaged in school. We want to look at this as an opportunity to be educators and to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And so we'll be connecting with those resources that are already in existence in the schools. We find out that it's an adult, we're going to have a lot more to talk about, and certainly be in communication with our district attorney's office about what the facts and circumstances are, what our options are, and how we should be looking at this collectively, how we're going to address it.
Great. There's a new trend, which is creating social media accounts for babies to show how they grow. Even family might unhealthily. Grooming usually starts with someone who knows the child well. What are your thoughts on that? I'm going to say, just before I toss it over, I think it depends. There's a lot of depends there. Someone's starting something because they want to be a content creator and they want to make money off their kids. Hugely problematic. That child is then, all their development is out there for the world to see. I also have people reaching out to me saying, is it okay that I'm sharing my kids' school picture? Is it okay that I'm sharing my kids at Disney World? I'm less worried about that because it's more about the emotional. We talked about emotional versus personal. You know, traditional showing a family photo here and there, what a kid is doing here and there. I'm less worried about because it's not putting that child on display consistently. It's just sort of sharing a little bit about them and what your family is doing. I'm more worried about the one-on-one discussions, wanting to talk to kids about sex, wanting to share that emotional information. But I also see people using the internet with their kids in ways that are hugely problematic. So it's hard to speak in broad terms, but I think you always have to put your kid first and say, how is the kid, how is this, me videotaping their temper tantrum and putting it online, how might they feel about that when they're 15? Right.
So actually, there's a lot about that that I really think is significant. First of all, we've allowed the internet to become a space where we can normalize behavior. And what we have found in learned behavior acts and sex crimes is that the more that the predators can normalize the behavior, the more likely they are to participate in the conduct, right? And so one of the things that happens is at an early age, and so families are constantly posting that stuff, and there are a lot of challenges in the law enforcement world with what is legally prohibited conduct and opposed to what isn't, right? And so it's not uncommon in law enforcement for us to find significant amounts of what we refer to as child erotica. It's not chargeable. And those images are as simple as a child in the bathtub playing or a child wearing a bathing suit on the beach. There are organizations overseas like the Ukrainian-based company LS Models that posts images of 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old boys and girls in men's and women's lingerie. And so those are not chargeable images, but it normalizes the behavior. And I think when we go down that rabbit hole, we create an environment which tells kids it's okay at an early age. Additionally, I think what plays into part of that is parents' behavior with the internet is being mirrored by the children. So when they see mom and dad posting images of themselves online that are questionable or maybe not so appropriate in front of children and acting certain ways on cameras, it normalizes that behavior and creates a culture in which kids think it's okay. And it opens a doorway for a predator to say, look, your mom and dad's doing it, so it must be okay for you to do that. And I think we have to be very careful with that stuff. But in the truest sense, I'm not a fan of that stuff being printed and posted. Those might be personal things that you want for your family, but they're really not appropriate for the public.
Any other thoughts? That was
I think you nailed it, but I would just say common sense is something that seems to have gone out the window when it comes to the internet with either, and I'm sure we've talked about it already in the last couple days, but that images are, once they're out there, they're out there, and they're out there for good. And when comments are made, same thing. And so I think if people kind of step back and had thought about the bigger picture of what am I doing to my family possibly with this picture that I'm posting or this comment that I'm making, they might step back from doing that. And it's unfortunate that social media, for instance, has become so big in this country and that people feel like if they're not posting something, they don't count or they're not part of something bigger. And it's unfortunate that they can just sort of get in trouble. As I always tell people is when I was growing up, and that was in like the 80s, that we were told not to talk to strangers. Don't tell somebody if they call on the phone that you're home alone, things about that nature. What people don't realize with the internet is that you can lock your doors, you can lock your windows, but that little portal, either in your phone or on your family computer, is an open window into your home, and people can come in. And people that you don't want to have in your home can be there. And really parents and the community need to understand that there can be dangers out there. And so we need to make sure that we're protecting as many people as possible.
Anytime you approve a friend request, you're letting someone into your living room, right? I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to ask each person to give one advice to parent, one piece of advice, if you could, to parents. And none of us have parenting figured out, I would assume, but so we're not doing this as like we've got it all figured out. But so I'll do this question and then one piece of advice to parents. So the question is, can you talk about the generational difference? For example, grandparents used to say a girl's asking for it if she's wearing a mini skirt. Generation Z might say you can wear whatever you want, a bra, whatever, and it's up to the people to control themselves and not to cause harm. And I think, just as someone who does internet culture, there are generational differences. I think in some cases we do better with each generation in some ways, and in some ways we regress, right? And it just depends. We talked about that triangle today. We don't want to put all the blame on the person who's the target. We're going to spread that out to the bystanders speaking up, to the people not causing harm, and that it shouldn't matter necessarily what you're wearing. It's more about how people treat you. But yet, common sense plays a part. You know, we do want to keep an eye on our drink. We do want to tell people where we're going. We do want to have some of those common sense pieces until we get to a point where no one is hurting each other. So that would be my thought. Other thoughts about generational differences when it comes to culture, online safety in general?
I just think parents need to understand what is out there and the dangers of it. I mean, I can tell you that I know somebody who had a couple, or has a couple kids, and when she was raising her kids, they were raised vegetarian, they were raised not to have white flour, they eat kale, all these things that the parent really was trying to look out for their child's best interest, their child's health as much as possible. Well, when their child turned 13, the child was allowed to have an Instagram account, and I went on just to make sure that everything was set to private, and nope, it was all public. And this person just didn't understand what Instagram was and didn't understand the dangers that were out there. So there really, I think, is a responsibility that parents have to make sure whatever social media is out there, that they're making sure that their kids are protecting themselves. I mean, I have a 6-year-old at home, so he's not getting near that yet, but I know at some point Snapchat and TikTok, which I know that they exist, but I don't have accounts, so I'm not familiar with what they really can do or the dangers that are out there, but I'm going to have to get familiar with them if my child wants to get involved with them at some point, which probably will happen, or there'll be something new out there and those will be in like MySpace land by that point. So, but I really do think it is, you just need to take that step to understand what dangers are out there, and if you're not, you're really not doing the best that you can by your children.
Yeah, it's dangerous to say, I don't get it, so I'm not going to get it. That's why things like this are so important, because we can help bridge that gap and help people get it. Other thoughts on that? Okay. So we're going to end by each person. We'll just maybe start the way that or if you don't mind starting, We'll start with you. We'll pass the mic down, and everyone can just give one, if you were to leave parents with one tip or one idea or one take home, what would that be?
Yeah, for me, it's pretty simple in my mind. It's turn up the noise. You know, earlier today, if you heard me speak, I said that Nico and I hunt the evil that other people pretend doesn't exist. And it's easy for us to go to bed at night and push those terrible thoughts out of our mind that people are out there that would want to prey on children. And so if we just think that it doesn't exist and pray that it doesn't exist, then it'll just go away. The sad reality is it's not going away. It's never going to go away. And that evil is out there, and we are going to hunt it, but we also need parents to turn up the noise and talk about it. So instead of pulling your child from an event that you think maybe is too strong in content for them to hear, you should sit down with them and listen and talk about it and turn that into a teachable moment. And when there's a story on the news about an internet predator that preyed on a child, let them see it. And until we do that, until we can all embrace the fact that it's going to take the entire community, along with law enforcement and its partners, to hold these people accountable, we're never going to get ahead of that. So my advice to parents is turn up the noise.
Yeah, I think we might start getting repetitive.
That's okay.
But yeah, I think we should not lose track of the fact that the internet is a wonderful thing. It exposes us to new ideas, and it enables us to communicate much better. But there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with it, and there's a lot of potential for exploitation as a result. Understand what children are using this technology for. Understand the apps and how they work. Matt pointed out the Omegle site. It says right in there, predators have been known to use this. Yeah, it's kind of a red flag. Talk to your child about those types of risks.
So my message would be very similar to what we've been hearing is don't underestimate the danger. Just do not underestimate it. It is there. As was already stated, that technology, that cell phone, that computer, you have all your doors locked, but as long as you're using that, you're letting someone or possibly providing access for that person to come right in and interact with your child. I mean, so you really have to be very vigilant about what's going on with the technology. Educate yourself so that you know what's going on. Have that communication with your child. And we all have to remember that, children are children, young people are young people. Their judgment is not where it is as an adult. We know that scientifically. We know that bad mistakes or mistakes are made because the judgment isn't there. And we have to acknowledge that. And be very judicious about when we allow access to online availability. Watch as that progresses, as the child matures, have appropriate conversations that's age appropriate so that they understand the dangers that are there, and trust but verify all the time. Be watching. The parent can be right there in the room and the child's on the computer, and if they're not watching what's going on, you don't know what's being accessed. It's that simple. So this is a ubiquitous problem. It's in our, anywhere that there's technology, there's the ability to access this. And the parents really should not underestimate the danger that's there or the access that's there. So.
I was born into a middle income family. Mom and dad were married. I was the oldest. And I was sexually abused by somebody within my school system when I was in first grade. My little brother was sick, and my parents were paying attention to that. And then after I was abused by him, it seemed to happen more and more, different people. And then I was a runaway. It's just sort of a snowball effect that happened. And there were so many different places that I could have been saved. But I fell through one crack after another crack after another. And when I was raising my own children, and now my eldest grandson just turned 18, he's a senior this year, my message to parents or to the community would be a parent. You're not their friend, you're not their buddy, you're not their social media, toy thing, or so many I see people, mothers using their kids to sell something or whatever. So many times I've talked to parents, mothers who have said to me, I'm not going to be a shadow on Friday night when my 13-year-old daughter is meeting her friends at Starbucks or at some place. She's got to learn how to deal with life sometime. That's not my philosophy, much like Ryan said and the other guys have said. We know too much, we've seen too much, I've experienced too much. So I have a finite time to be a parent. And during that time that I'm being a parent, it is my job to protect my child, to have them fully develop, because we've learned through ACEs what happens when they don't fully develop. And as a survivor, I've spent so many years healing what was done to me. It's not that one-time abuse and then, it's a scab on your knee and you put a Band-Aid on it. It's that abuse that you've got to spend decades healing. So it's not kids are resilient. When something happens to them, they'll get over it, it'll be fine. That's not true. It's a lot of work when the damage has been done. So 18 years is really as a soon to be 59-year-old person, man, that went by so fast. My grandkids are now, that old, it goes by so fast. So my focus was be a parent, then I can be their friend. But when they're a parent, when they're a child, I am to protect them. I am to get on whatever internet, whatever toys, whatever they're using, whatever they're playing, to investigate that and make sure they're safe. They did not go to roller skating. They did not go to a movie. They did not go anywhere that I was not within sight. And I'm watching stuff go down. And I'm thinking, boy, if the parents only saw what I'm watching the guy at the roller skating rink take the drug out of his pocket and hand it to, like I'm watching stuff. There's no other parents there, It's just important to be a parent if you have children. If you don't want to have children, don't have children. If you want to have children, be their parent.
So I would say this is kind of hard to say one thing, but my thing would be communication's always key. Speaking to your child, talking to your child, making them comfortable with them talking to you. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, especially when it comes to the teenage years. But they need to know that you love and you support them because all human beings crave that. And if they're not getting it at home, they're going to be looking for it someplace else. And unfortunately, that's something that predators, traffickers, abusers, they will exploit. And it makes people much more susceptible to that if they're not getting it where they should. And then the last thing would be just prevention on any front when it comes to abuse, when it comes to substance use disorder, is really something that it's a lot easier to have somebody be better off if you prevent them than having to deal with them after they've been victimized. And I can say that from child abuse up to elder abuse. And for people to lock their cars at night when they're in the driveway, because usually it's crimes of opportunity that people take. And if they see a person, if they see a child that they can exploit, then most likely they're going to do that. If they don't, if that child isn't susceptible like another one, most likely they're going to move on. But that's how predators work. And it's very unfortunate, but it's very real too.
So I get the pleasure of going, either last or second to last, so just repeating what everyone up here just said, because that all sounded really, really good, and you should all do that. Just to sound like a broken record, when I did my presentation, a lot of what you've heard already up here this afternoon, know where your kids are. If you know where they are and you know what they're doing, the odds that they are going to be a victim or have to live as a survivor is so much reduced. And it's not just knowing where they are physically and presently, but knowing where they are online. My 9-year-old got an Xbox, which my wife and I discussed for a very long time, and then we compromised and did what my wife told me to, which was buy him an Xbox. I went on there, and before he was allowed to play on it, I set up the parental controls, which is not just my own selfish desire not to have my checking account used to buy whatever the new game is this week, but also it has the ability to go on the internet, has the ability to go to social media, and I wanted to make sure that that was stopped. I also have a filter within my router. If you don't know how to do these things, there are people in your community who do. Talk to your schools, talk to your local police departments, your local sheriff's offices. If you ever come to us in Franklin County and want us to answer a question, we don't know the answer because we don't know everything, we will help find you the answer, especially when it comes to the safety of our community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I would just add, know your power and know your resources. The biggest prevention piece is caring, connected adults. So know that you have power and that this can be prevented, prevention is possible. And then know your resources. If this does happen, doesn't mean that you're a bad parent, and there are people out there who want to help you. So know your power, know your resources. And I'll toss it to you, Catherine, to say goodbye and whatever announcements you have to say.
Does anybody have any questions? We're good? Yay, thank you so much for spending your time with us. And thank you to our speakers. So glad to have you here. Thank you very much for coming. And have a safe rest of the day.
Thank you, Catherine, for putting this on as well. So thank you.